That intro is epic. Andrew, that intro is epic. Andrew, come on screen.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
It
It's
is,
an
and
epic intro.
you changed the very end.
Yeah. Yeah, you caught that.
Nice.
Because it's all different today.
And I got
Today,
to say
the
that that
tables have
little
turned.
shot of me having a sip of beer makes me sad because I'm not drinking beer anymore.
Right. Yeah. And you see it and you miss the taste.
I would, yeah, I'd like to
Yeah.
have a beer right now, but I'm not going to have one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Mark.
Hello. So we're back for part 2 of the Awesome People Talk to Andrew interview. If you guys missed part 1, we're turning the tables on this man, and I've invited all kinds of past guests to join the stream. Everybody's got crazy schedules, and basically, I don't even know what's going to happen. So people might just barge in to the session. I basically gave them a link that they can just join whenever they want to. So we'll see what happens. And going with the theme of part 1, we're just kind of having a chat through all of your past records and all of the crazy things that you've done, and just kind of keeping it loose as we go. So it's going to be fun today. Last 2 weeks ago, so in the end of part 1, we sort of left off with Jay-Z's 99 Problems, but we skipped over a whole bunch of stuff. So I want to go back because I've got some questions about some of these records, and I didn't want to let it go. Also, you mentioned before we left that you had a story about a Snickers bar, and I would like to hear that story.
It's not one Snickers bar.
Oh.
No, it's way more than one Snickers bar. So this was on the Michael Jackson tour, and other people in the tour will probably remember it slightly differently. I've told the story many times now, and I'm sure like stuff's wrong with some details. But the big picture is correct. So we're on tour on the Michael Jackson tour, and I think I mentioned last time that we were using these Antonov AR-118s. I think they were heavy lift planes, gigantic planes. And so they were owned by an English company, so English captain, pilot, but a Russian crew. And we did a show in Moscow. And I may have mentioned the fact that it was October and it was snowing, but they wouldn't turn the hot water on at the hotel because it wasn't winter, because it was October. So anyway, I feel like I've told it, but maybe I didn't. I must not have if I said remind me about it.
No.
Okay. So after the show, and it was, I think we had to actually end the show early because it was snowing and the snow was getting on the stage and it was really slippery. And doing that show without choreography was like, you know, that's not the show.
Right.
We may have finished it. We may have stopped early. But anyway, so we load out. We load the 28 trucks. We go to the airport, and one of the planes is there, nose up, kneeling down, ready to load. And the other plane is all the way on the other side of the tarmac in a corner. We're like, well, can we get both planes? Because we load them both at the same time. It just depends what comes off the trucks and all that. And they said, well, no. We'll just load the one. Oh, okay. So we start dumping trucks, and some of the stuff's got to stay outside. And we get to the point where we finished loading the first plane. Like, hey, so can we get the other plane over here so we can load up and go? And they said, no. Okay, what's going on? And it turns out that the Russian crew had done a little trip because it was their home turf and the plane was going to be there for a few days. So they went off and picked up some Snickers bars. And I'm talking about an entire plane load of Snickers bars. And this plane could hold 4 40-foot trucks with the cabs on, like without unloading, but they'd hold 14 trucks full of stuff. So this other plane was full of Snickers bars, and they had absolutely no paperwork. They just brought them in.
Oh my gosh.
Like, yeah, we went and got some Snickers bars. So finally, I seem to remember it was like a couple hours. They worked it out, and they started unloading the plane of the Snickers bars. But we managed to keep an entire pallet of Snickers bars on the plane. Like as they were dumping it, we sort of brought some road cases in and hid one. So we had Snickers bars for the rest of the tour on that plane. So anyway, so we finally load up, and then it was freezing cold, freezing. Load it all up. All the gear is really, really, really cold. The next place we were going was Tel Aviv. And when we opened up the nose of the plane in Tel Aviv, the temperature difference, because it was really hot and humid in Tel Aviv,
Oh no.
it was so much condensation, it was actually raining inside the plane, like
Really?
just pouring down inside the plane.
What?
All the condensation was so nuts.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's the Snickers bar story.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane. Yeah, at first I was like, wait, like they left the airport to go get Snickers bars? What?
No, no, they
No, they.
flew out because this was it was 90 early 90s, and the wall came down in 89, and
Hmm.
the whole thing was sort of blowing up, so the economy was opening up, but not that much, not to where
Right.
you could just bring in 60 tons of Snickers bars with no paperwork.
Right. Right. And it caused it to rain.
Yeah,
Like
because
it's
the
just
temperature
dripping off the
difference.
ceiling, or you have a cloud.
No cloud, but it was dripping off the ceiling so
Yeah.
much that it was like a
Wow.
monsoon in there for about 20 minutes.
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
Very nice. All
Yeah.
right. There's our Snicker bar story. Very nice. Um, so that is also the rainstorm story that you mentioned then.
Yeah. It's
Yeah. Right. Oh,
all one thing.
that's great. Nice. Okay. So what this is early 90s that happened, right? When you were on that
Yeah,
tour.
that would have
Yeah.
been 92, 93.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm with my wife again. Yeah, something like
Yeah.
that.
Nice. Awesome. Okay. Well, I want to skip forward to about 99 and uh I want to talk about the Iggy Pop record a little bit, Avenue B.
So there's not a huge amount. So
Hmm.
that was the time where I did a lot of programming and editing and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
Don was called up and said, "Can you put a couple of loops on one Iggy Pop song on this album I'm producing?"
Hmm.
And so he brought it over. It must have been on D88s or something like that. And so I made a click track and I started programming some loops. And he's like, yeah, that stuff's cool. So I'm going to go get some pizza. So
Hmm.
he split to go get pizza. And I was kind of done programming. And I thought, I'm going to just mix this because I want to, because it's really cool. And it was already sounding pretty good. And at that point, it was on a Mackie analog, like 32 input analog 8 bus, I think it was called.
Hmm.
And so I just started mixing. I had a little bit of outboard gear. And Don got back and he's like, "Hey, man, this sounds really good." And so worked on the mix for another, I don't know, 20 minutes or something. And we put it on a DAT and then it's on the record. So it was the only song I actually worked on. But so the programming in that
Ah,
mix was mine, which was really cool. Because then many years later, I mixed the show, the DVD at the concert at Royal Albert Hall, and saw him after the show, but did not manage to actually speak to him to say like, "Hey, forever ago." Anyway,
did this
um,
yeah thing and I'm shaking all over.
I did
Uh
did the one thing.
okay, so in the credits for that, I'm looking at title. You're also listed as an associated performer on there. Did you also play on this record?
No, but at that point, that was right at the point where programming was a musician gig. Like
Okay.
they changed something with the musicians union, and programming was a thing.
Yeah.
Not that that ever turned into any money, but it turned into, that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. All
Yeah.
right. So, all right. So at this point in your career, how'd you get the call for this one? How'd you get the call from Don Was? Where did you meet up with Don?
I'm trying to think what the first thing was I did for Don.
Hmm.
Um, I don't really know. Do you remember, Debbie? Yeah, it could have been actually. Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, either we'd already worked on some stuff, but he got in touch because he was going to do a Leona Ness record.
Mm.
And he said, "Do you want to do that with me?" I'm like, absolutely. That would be amazing. And then that record didn't happen. And he said, "Oh, well, I'm also working with this artist, Wendy, and she and her husband are writing partners. And so let's do that record instead."
Yeah.
So we did that instead. And we did probably 6 weeks at my place. Then I had another gig, which I don't remember what gig that was. And so they went off and they worked at, it was called Studio 7. at Ocean Wave, the bit that became East West, like a little
Mm.
corner room up front. And then, and that was with, help me out, Debbie. He just came with his wife to visit. Um, anyway, I can't remember his name now, which is horrendous because he's, huh? No. Before that. Anyway, and then it came back to my place to mix. And I may have mentioned that's when Don actually gave me the thank you note for adding a little 10K to something.
Nice.
So that
Yeah.
was that record. So yeah, so we mixed all
Okay.
that there. And I think the Iggy Pop stuff was after that. I mean, and then we had another thing where he's like, hey, I need to add some keyboards to a Ziggy Marley record. And so they just showed up for a day. And Ziggy had this guy named Sky High. And you can imagine what he did. And so there were just a bunch of dreadlock dudes hanging out in the driveway.
Oh,
And I had
man.
dread at that point.
Yeah,
And they
yeah.
were kind of shocked that I didn't smoke. I didn't
Yeah.
partake. So,
Right. Right.
yeah.
Like, you got
I
the
don't-
dreads.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly how I met Don, but it was a record like that. Like I got recommended to do something, and then we did a bunch of stuff on and off.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so at that point, was this this is pretty early in I mean fairly early, not super early, but this is early in, switching over from touring to making records ish, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I did the Michael Jackson tour, and then after that, there was a Barbra Streisand concert that opened the MGM Grand in Las Vegas
right.
over Christmas, and I went and did that show, which was interesting. I mean, it was a great band, and the crew was all very cool. Simon Franklin was there, which was fun.
Yeah.
And
is that where you met Simon?
No, I'd known Simon. I think I told you, I can't remember. I don't know when I've told stories. I think I mentioned before that he and his brother wrote jingles in London when I was working in the London office. And
That's
I had
right.
to
Yeah.
fax, I had to fax parts to one of his sessions. But the hotel was not finished. So the first room they gave me had no toilet. The second room they gave me had no electricity. And I think the third one was like, it was habitable. So
right.
that was good.
Right.
But then after that, then there was going to be a tour. And I, terrified about work, thought, well, yeah, I'll do that because it's that. And Debbie said, you really not going to do that. And she was absolutely right. So that was sort of the end of the touring. And then that's when I started doing a lot of MIDI programming and trying to help build studios for people and, just anything I could do. So that was probably 95-ish.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, at this point you've made a whole lot of connections from your work with Synclavier and, just past relationships. You had a lot of friends from college that were working in LA and everything. Was that mostly where you were finding your gigs, was just these kind of relationships that had been built up, or were you starting to get calls at this point from kind of your name being passed around town? Or
yeah, I mean, I'm sure there was some stuff that just happened, but I mean, it's always through somebody. It might have been a studio manager who knew that I did stuff. But I mean, at that point and at that level of the work, it's all word of mouth. It's all like a direct recommendation from someone. And, Carmen, we talked about last time he came in. I mean, he was responsible for a huge amount of stuff, getting me on that. And then I met people and then did stuff. I actually heard from Rob Abel, who's in a band called The Picture, that Carmen was producing. And then I mixed the 4-song EP that they did and then stayed in touch and did some more stuff for him. And he just finished another record. So he got in touch about that. So Carmen was responsible for a lot of stuff. And that's how I met Wendy and Lisa, was through Carmen as well.
Right. Okay. So at this time, I'm curious, what it's like kind of you're in Los Angeles, you're getting these calls for these really good gigs, and you have a bunch of relationships. But how did your calendar look? Did you have like anxiety at that time about things being booked out, or did you feel like things were kind of always, booked out, or you were getting calls daily for things, or?
Oh, no, no, no. I mean, I've been
Yeah,
terrified my entire career,
yeah,
basically. And it was there were a lot of really cool gigs there, but there was a lot of stuff where it was just straight up vocal tuning, and
hmm,
boy bands were big then, and so that was a thing. And I just took whatever I could get,
yeah,
whatever there was I would do to a point. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
To
so
what point?
well, I mean, there was. I think I mentioned. See, again, I can
Yeah.
never remember. You'll have to tell me if I mentioned stuff last time. I was doing a ton of vocal tuning, and there was
Hmm.
one boy band that I was doing, and I just thought I really can't be responsible for this coming out.
Yeah.
So I quit that gig, and I just said, "Look, I can't." So I stopped taking vocal tuning only gigs at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. And
But other
at
than
that
that,
time, I don't think that we talked about what that looked like, at least in the last interview. I don't think. I mean, we've probably talked about it somewhere at some point, but what was vocal tuning at that point? Because this is late '90s.
yeah,
This
I
is
mean,
pre-auto
this
tune, right?
was so. I would get the stuff on D88. There was
Hmm.
no uh, sessions to get already dumped in. So probably dumped from tape of some description. Sometimes I would go to the studio and transfer. Sometimes they would just transfer and send me tapes.
Hmm.
Then Pro Tools was around and a multi-track thing. I think probably when I started, it was 16 tracks per card, because this was back when you hooked the drives directly up to the card. And then at some point during that, the D24 card came out, and then that was 24 tracks per card. So I would dump in a rough mix and the vocals. It was the very beginning of auto-tune, and that was magic at that point.
Hmm.
So at that point, I would be doing auto-tune. There were other weirder ways to have to tune before that. I mean, I tuned
Yeah.
vocals in Clear using pitch bend, the H3000, spinning the wheel and punching in, all kinds of
That's what I
things.
was wondering about. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so doing all that, but then once Autotune came out, I learned to do graphic mode almost immediately.
Yeah.
And that was, it was painstaking, but it was absolutely the best way to
Yeah.
do stuff at that point. So I would do that, and then I would dump it back to D88, and then
Yeah.
send the tapes back.
Do you ever miss graphic mode? I mean, we don't quite have the same thing in Melodyne. It's the tools are pretty awesome, but was there anything about graphic mode that you miss?
No, I mean, to me, Melodyne is graphic mode,
Yeah,
just the next generation of it.
right.
Yeah.
With more slicing and all of that. Because I remember just
Yeah,
drawing a
but
lot
just
of lines in
yeah,
it.
exactly. I mean, that was the
Yeah,
thing. You had to start off by drawing the lines. It
yeah,
didn't start you off with lines that you can modify. So no, I'm fine with the way Melodyne does it. There's nothing I miss
right, right.
about that.
Yeah. For some reason, I like every once in a while, my hand wants like the ability to do the like you click a point and then you click a point and it would do the straight line thing or whatever.
Yeah.
I miss something about that sometimes in Melodyne, but it's probably like a broken nostalgia thing where it wouldn't actually be a good thing to have.
Yeah, I think that's like analog tape.
Right. You don't want
Not as
that.
good as you
Yeah.
remember.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, skipping forward, Iggy Pop was 99. The next thing I have to ask you about is 2002, Alanis Morissette. Was the in between just kind of a lot of the random stuff like you were talking about, or do you remember anything in particular in that period?
Man, I don't remember anything in particular by date anyway. So, yeah, I really don't know. I mean, that
Hmm.
the album with Don might have been in there somewhere. That might have been earlier.
Hmm.
Not really sure. No, that probably would have been about then.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's stuff, I'm sure. And the other
There
thing is, of
is,
course,
yeah.
you're looking and it's by release date. So it's not
Exactly.
necessarily the order I worked on things. But at this
Right.
point, I can't really remember the chronology. So you know better than me.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'll just let you mention things. And if something else comes to mind, I'll bring it up. It's
Yeah.
Wendy Page, by the way. I didn't actually say her name. So
Cool.
yeah, duh.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to jump to Alanis Morissette. So this is at a pretty big point in her career. She was, I think like Jagged Little Pill was like late-ish 90s, like 96, 97 or something.
Yeah, something like that.
And then there was a record after that, like it was a big artist, you know. She
Yeah.
still is, obviously, but like yeah, at that point, what did that whole thing look like? How'd you get the call for that? And
Well, I mean, the first thing is, I believe this was the first self-produced record.
hmm
She'd done the first one with Glenn Ballard exclusively. She may have done the second one with Glenn again or with someone else. I don't remember. I mean, you know, you can look it up,
yeah,
and everyone in the chat will and tell me when I'm
they'll
wrong.
let us know.
And I
Yeah.
will misspeak, by the way. Like, yes, Groucho Marx was not the host of This Is Your Life. Like, okay, stuff like that's
Yeah.
going to come slipping out of my mouth. It's all just in time manufacturing here. And the Atlantis gig, I was not the engineer on that. This was just Pro Tools.
hmm
But at this point, we're tracking to Pro Tools, and it was running Pro Tools on those sessions was a pretty involved gig,
Yeah.
because you are the tape machine and the playback and the editing, the punching. So it was like being a tape op, you know, back in the day, where you really have to stay on top of things. And I'm
Mm.
pretty sure that that gig came through Joel Shears, amazing guitar player, who I also met through Carmen.
hmm
And I knew a couple other people. Chris Cheney was on that date, and a few other people in the band I knew. So I think that's how I got that gig.
Mm.
And it didn't work out for a bunch of different reasons. I was there for a couple of weeks, and then just things changed about how it was going to be produced. But there was a
Mm.
point early on in that session where, for some reason, Alanis was taking pictures of everybody, and I think it was a Polaroid. And she came over to take a picture of me, and I said, there are no pictures of me smiling, which is why the picture you've got at the beginning of this thing, like, I need a copy of it because I actually don't
Right.
mind it, but there are no pictures of me smiling, like, anywhere.
hmm
And so she came up and went, I said, I'm not going to smile. And she went, click, nothing happened. Then she went, click again, and like it came out mangled. And it was so and I said, getting me to smile is like getting a picture of the Shroud of Turin. It's not going to happen. And because it screwed up so much, she took the third picture and it worked, but I was smiling because it
At
was
the
so messed
camera.
up that it actually was like the Shroud of Turin.
Yeah.
So she had one of the very few pictures of me smiling. I have no idea where that
Nice.
went. But now there are
Oh man.
two, so
Right.
that's good.
Great.
And then
Yeah.
a while later, I mean, this could have been a couple of years later, I don't even remember, Joel brought me to, she was having a birthday party at her house. And, you know, it was a big party and lots of people were there.
hmm
And I went with Joel. And this is when Daryl Thorpe was working with Nigel at Ocean Way.
Mm. Right.
And I was desperate to meet him. I mean,
Yeah.
I've met him a bunch of times now, and I'm still desperate to hang out. You know, like,
Yeah.
he's a god. So anyway, I met him, and it was really awkward, and I was losing my voice. Like, I don't think I was sick, but like I could barely talk, and it was really loud. And then on my way out, I wanted to go say goodbye to him because I'd like been introduced. Like, okay, I need to reinforce the fact that I've met him. And I walked in to a room. I think he was playing ping pong or something with somebody.
hmm
And there was an album that Carmen had produced on this band called Ekova. And great band. And I'd done some programming because Carmen brought me in to do it. And I'd also played trumpet on it. And the song that I played trumpet on was playing at that moment. And so, like, I said goodbye. And then I actually went back into the room to point out that that was me on trumpet. And then I just felt like such a dick. And I left. And I still think about that because
Yeah.
it was so pathetic, you know.
It's
Like, I
not
don't want
pathetic.
to
Yeah.
be a guy. I want it to be like someone who's played trumpet on a cool record. And
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
horrible,
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah. But I mean, at the same time, like, how many people have you met, you know, like that since then, who have, you know, been nervous talking to you or, you know, something like that, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's a
but
thing.
still, and plus that was a super name droppy little story, wasn't it?
I'm the Oh well.
Nigel Godrich. I didn't.
Just said Nigel.
Oh well, Nigel Godrich. I mean, the God
Yeah.
is in the name, like, you know.
Right. Nice. That would have been around the time of Hail to the Thief, right?
Yeah,
If
exactly.
he
That
was,
would be
yeah,
one more
in LA.
time.
And, yeah. Oof, man. That's awesome. Uh, What a record. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about that record.
We can. I've never worked on it.
Right. Okay, so next thing I have, which according to these internet sources is your first Chili Peppers credit on By the Way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the beginning of something really big. So what happened here?
So this was they were working on the record, and it got to the point where Jim Scott had started mixing, and he was at the Village mixing, but there was still vocals to do. So
Mm,
John had to move out of his house. They're doing construction or something like that, and he had a room at the Chateau Marmont in Hollywood. And so they rented another room and set up a BCM 10, and they were
mm,
tracking Anthony's vocals and his background vocals. But then at some point, Anthony wanted to do his vocals on the West Side. I think because he wanted to be closer to the mixing, and plus it was closer to where he lived.
mhm,
So, and I'm really sorry, I'm spacing on the engineer's name who did it. He also worked on the Linkin Park record. Really great engineer, really nice guy.
mm.
You can probably find his name.
Um,
I'll
Might be
let
able
you
to tell
look.
you.
That'll be your fault if we don't remember this.
Well,
No.
additional
So anyway,
engineer they have, but they
so
don't have main. So yeah.
yeah. Okay, so he was going to go with Anthony over to the Village, and so they needed someone to record John. So I got the call, like, "Hey, can you come on Saturday and I can just show you the setup, and then start Monday, whatever." And Debbie
Mhm,
and I were supposed to go to dinner or to a party or something. I'm like, "Well, yeah, I can come in the afternoon, but just for an hour or so." And I show up, and the engineer, whose name I cannot remember, and that's driving me crazy because I hate that,
mhm,
um, says, "Okay, here are the lyrics. There's the hard drive. That's BCM 10. There's a microphone in the bedroom, and I got to go." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's fine. So I'll come back Monday." He said, "No, no, no. John's coming up like in half an hour, and Rick's coming to have a listen."
mhm.
Like, um, okay. So I think, well, maybe they're just going to have a quick listen to map stuff out. And so the very first thing that happens, and this may not have been the first day, but I think it is. I think it is the very first time that I actually met John in person.
Mm,
He comes up, he opens the door to the room because, of course, he's got a key. He walks in holding a guitar, and I was all set up for vocals, like just to be
right.
ready. And he walks in with a guitar, and he plugs it into an amp, and he says, "Okay, we're going to do a solo on blah blah blah." And he names some song, and I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. And of course,
Hmm.
the song titles are all temporary, and so like what's on the drive doesn't match what he said. And I'm looking
Right.
through the lyrics trying to find like if it said. And so finally I get the right song up. I don't know what the hell's going on. And then I realize, well, there's no microphone on the amp. So I just take the vocal mic and I turn the stand so it's down in front of the amp, and I just hit record. I don't even know where in the song I'm supposed to hit record. And
Yeah.
John plays this blistering solo. And of course, everything was set up for vocals. So the mic gain is
Oh my
insane.
gosh. Yeah.
And I'm looking at this recording, and it's just a square wave. It's so fucked. And I'm like, "John, I'm really and I don't even think he knew my name because he's like thinking about the solo as he walks in. He may not even have noticed that it wasn't someone who'd already been there before until after he got done playing, because he got it out of his head and he was done. And he comes in and has a listen and he's like, "Nah, it's fine. Let's do some vocals."
That's amazing.
So then I was with him, I would imagine 6 weeks or so,
Okay.
something like that. And we did a ton of background vocals. We did a lot of modular stuff, which was fun.
Yeah.
I gave him like a bunch of samples of things, and then he turned out he really didn't want to use samplers. So I don't know that he ever used the stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just hung out for 6 weeks, and it
Nice.
was sort of amazing. Because
Yeah.
every once in a while on these records, like on the Michael Jackson record, I was telling you, like it was just me in a room, and Steve Porcaro showed up for a few weeks, and we just did stuff.
Yeah.
And it kind of felt like that, like we're just doing stuff, and no one came by because we would send the tracks over to the Village, and and
Yeah.
John's so good that it's not like anyone said, "Oh, that's really good. Can you try it again?" Like, this is
Yeah.
done. And
Right.
so, yeah, so I recorded a lot of, I don't want to say most because I don't know how much he'd done before then, but a huge chunk
Mhm.
of the overdubs that John did on that record.
That is amazing. Nice. And it
What's
was
that?
just a.
No. No. Oh, Debbie's trying to help me remember the engineer, but no, it wasn't. It wasn't.
Uh, was it Vlado Meller?
No, he mastered it.
He's listed as an engineer and a
Yeah.
master.
Who
Yeah.
else is listed
Okay.
as an engineer on that? Jim Scott, obviously.
Jim Scott. Yeah, that's all you get. You got Jim
Really?
Scott. I think Ryan Hewitt is listed as additional engineer on This Is the Place. And yeah,
And
Jim Scott,
not
Vlado
Ryan.
Meller. Vlado's
That's
listed as an engineer in a couple songs. Yeah.
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 Anyway,
Yeah.
his
Crazy.
name will come to me, and I feel like shit not remembering. I mean, if you look at the Lincoln Park Minutes to Midnight, that should have his name absolutely,
Oh,
because he
nice.
engineered a ton of that.
Okay. We are going to
Um,
get to that record. So we
yeah,
should chat about it.
I'm sure you
But
will.
we have to stop this little journey through time because somebody's trying to barge into the chat. So
Uh-oh.
hold
I
on
get
a
really
second here.
nervous when this happens because I wondered, like, did I just talk shit about
It's part
whoever
of the
this is going
fun.
to be?
Yeah. All right. So joining us is the one and only. As soon as I assign him, right now it's just a cartoon right
Mystery
there.
guest. Are
This
you gonna
cartoon has a
like Mr.
mystery
Kitchen
guest.
Boy? Yeah.
Is the one and only Matt Ross Bang. How's it going, Matt?
Matt Ross Bang.
Hey everybody, I was the engineer on the Red Hot Chili Peppers that
No, you were
Andrew
not.
You
Puremix.
forgot,
Engineer on
Matt.
everything else. No, it wasn't Dana. It's not Dana. I know, but it's a different engineer. Anyway, my wife is trying to correct me, but she isn't right in
And
this
she's
case.
probably
Usually
right. She's probably
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Well, I think Matt has a question. I'm going to step off camera for a second and let
Well,
that
Mark,
happen.
but you're going to mirror my video again because you're.
Did it
it's not.
switch? I'll
Yeah,
work on it while I'm.
Yeah,
off
and
here.
I'll talk to Matt. What's going on, Matt?
Boom.
my question is, I was fortunate enough to do Andrew Scheps' first Andrew Talks to Awesome People,
Yes, you
where
were the
Andrew
guinea
was
pig.
Andrew was implicit that we only talked for under an hour. And
I
then every
know.
episode after that was 8 hours. So I was curious, why don't you like me, Andrew?
Well, no, let me explain why, actually. There's a really good reason. First of all, you were the first one, and I didn't think that I could go longer than an hour. I thought I would be boring as hell. And I remember the interview because we were talking about you getting the key to the city and all this amazing stuff. And I was like, fuck, man, the hour's up. But the reason I had to go is because this was very early in lockdown. And a friend of mine who used to do board games like once a week at a pub had done like an online pub Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And I'm like, well, I'm doing that. So we'll do the interviews an hour before. Like we'd worked it out that we had an hour. And then he stopped doing the little virtual pub 3 days a week. And that's when they ballooned up to, 18 hours each. But we could have you back and do part 2.
Well, apology accepted. I was just messing with you. How you been, old buddy?
I've been good. I just got to point out that it's still the fact that you can just say, yeah, man, I'm mixing some Elvis. Like, come on. What's cooler than that?
Well, like I said, he hasn't had a hit since I started mixing them, so I may not get to do it very much longer.
Oh, I think you will. I think you will. Then you got
Have
to go
you
back and do them all in Atmos.
have you done any of that pulling out of the, like, I know what Giles is doing with the Beatles, where he's pulling out sub mixes off of like the 4-track stuff. Have you done any of that yet, where you're pulling drums out of mixes? And
I've just started. There's a guy who is like the king of demixing. Like it's a huge thing. I mean, there's some plugins and some apps that do it. Ooh, video, nice.
yeah,
Whoa, Mark's
you have
making
2 cameras
start.
going.
So there's lots of standalone stuff that will do it, but there is a huge community who do it. I think because people want instrumental mixes and then they want the vocals separate, and that's sort of where the impetus to make it really good has happened. But we've been, and I'm not sure if he wants his name mentioned or not, so I'm not going to do it, but maybe he's going to be pissed that I'm not giving him some props on here. But I don't know, how he wants to handle that. But we've been going through some stuff and just like testing, and it's astonishing what you can do. I mean, obviously,
Really?
big distorted stuff, everything starts to sound the same, and it's really hard to split. But more acoustic or open sounding things, you can really separate stuff. So yeah, I will be. I'm sure that's going to come up.
Is there some artifacts, like if you do too much RX and you get some kind of underwater sounds or
Yeah,
clippings,
there
there's
can be a
weird
bit
stuff.
of that. I mean, the thing that I've noticed the most is like when you get the vocals split out, sometimes the vocal effects are there and then some lines are cut off because something else happens. So it sort of ties the vocal effects into some other instrument.
Hmm.
But the artifact wise, no. If you put the stuff together, it's the record. Like it's completely lossless in the way it does it. And it's insane how good it is. So yeah.
That's awesome.
We'll be doing, we'll be doing like Atmos versions of the original mono Elvis shit, I'm sure.
Eventually. That'd be fun. I'd mess with that.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
How's Miss Debbie doing?
She's good. She's just off camera here because she doesn't want to be seen.
Just off camera.
Just off camera. She's
I'm gonna come see y'all this year, or maybe next year, Debbie. One of these years, I'm coming.
well,
Definitely.
hopefully I'm going to come see you in January. That'll be exciting.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Is Debbie gonna come in town for 2, or is she staying home?
We don't know yet. We don't know
Yeah.
yet. It's too far ahead to even think about that.
Yeah.
You have to come.
You got to come visit.
Yeah.
I know I need to. I get jealous when Jeff Powell's out there and I'm not.
Well, he only came once, and it was a long time ago, so you don't have to be too jealous now.
That's true.
Nice. Awesome. You guys have you've done a few things together as well.
We have.
I've been asked to mix some stuff that this boy has produced and recorded, which was really fun.
Yeah.
We
And
used to
I
potluck
think
together.
Yes. Yeah, that's when I first met you, I believe, at the potluck conference. And it was really, really hot, and my back went out on the very first day. So it was a bit of a weird one. But that's the day that was the time that we sat dead silent and listened to the second Low Roar record together.
Mm-hmm.
And we lost our minds that night.
It,
that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite experiences ever. We were for the people who don't know, potluck was like a tape off, like old tape off con, and audio nerds assemble in the hottest state at the hottest month and ruin our studio tans and get to listen to smart people talk. And Andrew was one of them. And then Andrew and I were hosting the Recording Academy room, which meant nobody was going to be there.
But they had like a snow cone machine and alcohol to put in them.
Yeah. We had Michael Romanowski's Absinthe that we turned into snow cones. And Andrew played me Low Roar's second album on some little JBLs in a hotel room. And Mark, it was my first time hearing Low Roar, so it blew my mind. But the amazing thing about that album was all the people that came into the room talking in party mode, and then just sat behind us quietly and listened to the whole record top to bottom. And
I remember thinking like it was just us in the room, and I was sort of aware of people coming in, but I figured they were leaving. And when it finished, we turned around, and there must have been another 10 people in there, at least.
Yeah, there was a lot of people in there. I was going to say 30, so somewhere
okay,
between
30.
10
Let's
to
say 30.
30 is better. And this is also the time, I forget what song it was, but Andrew had rolled all the top end off acoustics in the mix until the chorus, and when the chorus hit, he like ripped off the filters, and I looked at him and I was just like, "You son of a bitch!"
Well, I'm sure we're going to talk about Low Roar for a really long time at some point, but yeah, and that doing that was born out of, and this happened all the time in the Low Roar records, where Ryan, the songwriter, the main guy, would tell me something. And it'd be like, man, I can't do that. Like that would fuck up everything. But I'd find a way to sort of kind of do it. On that song, he said, I don't want the acoustic on there at all. Because it was strumming away from the very beginning. But like there were huge parts of the song where it was the only instrument. And I thought, I cannot get rid of this. So that was the way I did it. I just put a low pass filter on it and sort of automated it through the choruses. And then finally, like 3 minutes into the song, you get the payoff of the filter finally opening all the way up. And that's right when the song stops. And then it kind of shifts gears and you get the big strumming acoustic. And it was a real payoff thing. But I wouldn't
Yeah.
have done it unless Ryan said, take it out.
Yeah. It was amazing. Amazing move.
Yeah. He was an inspiring dude.
Yeah. R.I.P. for those who don't know. We miss him. I never knew
Yeah.
him, but his music just blew my mind, and what you guys did together was so cool. Was that the first headphone mix record? Was Low Roar 2, or was it Low
Yeah,
Roar
that
Low
was the
Roar 1?
one where we were visiting my wife's parents. So we were over in England, and I mixed and did most of the editing and overdubs and changes there, just on a laptop with headphones. The first album too, I mixed most of it in headphones and then went out to the studio. And then with that one, when we got back, I did a bunch of modular stuff and then finished the record. But yeah, strangely, even though the first record was 2011, so years before I started mixing in the box completely, every single one of those records has been done completely in the box because I just wanted to be able to work on them for a long time and not have to
Yeah.
keep starting stuff. So
Do you find that? And I don't mean to hijack all the time, Mark, but I will take as much time as you give me, Mark.
You keep
Do you
going.
find that mixing? I'm not going to say it's COVID, but during COVID, I think also it's a matter of getting a little older, where it's hard for me to sit in the chair for as long as I used to be able to sit in the chair longer than anybody. Now my back hurts, or my neck hurts, or my arthritis, whatever it is, starts barking, and I have to get up, and I feel like I
Matt
can't
just turned
concentrate as
27.
long. Yeah, and but it was during COVID. I think I realized that maybe it was we had a longer break, that I wasn't able to focus as long on certain things, or I need to get up more. And I feel like as time goes on, I have gotten a little bit slower sometimes on mixing. I was curious, do you slow down? I feel like you slow down a little bit on how long it takes you to get a mix, or not? And I don't mean that in a bad way. You know, some songs you
yeah,
get fast, but
yeah. I mean, every once in a while, there's one that just happens super quick in the
yeah,
midst of the rest of it. But I mean, I say this all the time. Like, I have no idea how much time I actually spend on each song because I try and mix the whole thing at once because I can.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, even if it's not a huge number of hours, I don't like turning them around in less than a week. You know, if
yeah,
I've got a few, so like if I've got 3 songs to do, there's no way I'm doing them in less than a week because I need to come back to them fresh many
yeah.
times.
Yeah, I think that's the same with me too. Or even just like wrapping my head around the initial. If it's something you didn't engineer, just wrapping your head around their layout and the thought and in the mics and what the song's doing. It takes me a little bit longer now than you just start going. But I was curious about that with you.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say that it takes longer because we're doing better work that's more sympathetic instead of just peeing all over it. That's my
Yeah,
theory.
I do. Yeah, well, I'll take that. I do agree, because it's so easy to go do things so quickly, but then don't know the intent sometimes behind it, or
Yeah.
then it becomes little moves.
Yeah, and I think it's also like when you're tracking a record for a long time, you sort of wake up one day with a really like intense idea about one song. And then you go in and you try it and it may work, it may not work, like whatever. But the same with mixing. Like I'll sort of wake up thinking like, "Oh man, on that song I could do this." But if I was churning out a song a day, I would never have the chance to think of it.
Yeah, and then you listen to it later after it's come out, and you're like, why did I not try this there? Now I
Yeah.
hear
Yeah,
it.
because it ends up being like just trying to get it done thing. And so you're not really thinking about anything other than like, yeah, this balance is good and it sounds good. All right, we're done. And that can work on some records. It's all you need to do if it's well produced and good songs, then that you just got to get out of the way. But sometimes it's good to kind of get in the way for a minute and then realize you're an idiot and then get out of the way.
The last time we talked, you were kind of, or maybe it was 2 times ago, we talked. You had mentioned that the rear bus, or I think I can't remember if it was rear bus or I really love that Pultec LA2 Pultec Vocal Air. Uh, I hate to say trick, but that method you use, because that has really helped me a lot. Actually, funny enough, on the Elvis stuff, because he'll start going, whoa, and you can't understand a word he's saying. It's just like 200 hertz all day. And that, just having that vocal air, I can push up the fader on times where I need him to cut through or be enunciating more or something. Um, but last time I think I mentioned it to you, you had said that it hadn't been working for you lately, or that the rear bus wasn't doing it.
Yeah,
And
that vocal thing is definitely working for me. I don't default to having all the stuff on like I used to, and I'm
yeah,
using a lot less of it. But yeah, no, that vocal thing, it's exactly what you're talking about. It just carves a hole for the vocal. So it
yeah,
almost doesn't matter what else is going on. It's just much easier to hear what's happening in the vocals because it's more compact. But yeah, the rest of it, the rear bus, all the drum stuff, it's sometimes it used to be that I couldn't control the output levels other than individually, and then I popped a VCA on them so I can control all of them. And instead of being a zero, like it's down at -20, -18, something like that. And it doesn't sound any different to me, but when I put it up at zero, it just sounds crazy to me now. It's way
yeah.
too much.
I think that I love hearing that, because I experienced this too, where it's like, whatever, I don't know if it's I get tired of doing something a certain way, or I get tired of the sound for a while,
Yeah.
but it seems like some of those things that work so good, at some point, you just abandon them, or you find something else, and then maybe you come back, maybe you don't. But I think it's cool to hear that coming from you, and especially in this kind of plug-in easy world, where it's easy to import everything we just had and keep going. But it's cool to hear that even you go back and check it and bypass it and go, not this time, it's not doing it, or you kind
Yeah.
of find different ways.
I mean, I think, like you said, everything has a signature to it, and that signature can be really awesome for a while. Like I used a 33609. Well, I used 2264s, which is like double mono versions of 33609 on the mix bus forever. And then when I moved into the box, I used the 33609 plugin
Yeah,
forever. And I loved it, but it did something to the drums that you can't undo. Like there's no, oh, I want a little less of that kind of thing. And it was
yeah,
something I loved for years, and then I just got really sick of it. I mean, I think the easy example of it is with early Autotune. I mean, Autotune sounds great now, just like Melodyne was. I don't want to be calling one out over the other. But when Autotune first came out, it was like it was magic. And then 6 months later, everybody was hearing the artifacts, but you didn't even hear them at first. You had no idea that there
yeah.
were artifacts, and everything is like that.
I even now, when I like do my monitor of my low mix was I'm printing, half the time I stop it now, because just acoustic guitar, it sounds like Pro Tools clicks sometimes, where I like, it'll be like, I'm ready to print this mix. It's 10 o'clock at night, and I'll be like, God, it sounds like there's just something clicky at low volume sometimes, where the acoustic strums in a dense mix will sound like edits. I'm going like RX declick and just declicking certain transients in case someone would ever listen low mix. And I think about, like, when people are on tape, and this isn't a pro tape or pro digital thing comment, just now there's all these things in music that sound like Pro Tools ish errors that I'm trying to correct, that aren't even wrong, but they could
Yeah.
potentially sound like a Pro Tools error. Where before, a mouth click or whatever would happen, you wouldn't think twice about it.
No. I mean, and that's why I do not print real time. When I
Yeah,
decide I'm gonna print, I don't wanna hear it again because I
yeah,
know you'll always hear something. I would
yeah.
never print a mix if I did it that way. So,
I completely understand that thought process. I still do a little, even I still mix on the board and do some analog, so I can't offline, because I still do like a hardware insert or two, or I use the chamber. But I do like when I have my mix, I do just turn the like knob barely on, and I'll just, if I catch something, I catch something, or I'll walk in the
Yeah.
other room and hear it to the room. But I do know where you keep stopping it over like the fade out, and you're like, what am I doing? Just print this thing.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna
Especially
hop
if
in
you're doing
here.
it manually. Yes,
Slide
sir.
in. There we go. All right. Well, I have it documented in many places where you say the great answer of how do you know when a mix is done is when you have nothing left that you would change,
Yeah.
or when you turn the speakers off and you don't listen for anything else that you would change.
Exactly. No, I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's nothing you would change in the moment.
Right.
And
Right.
then
Right.
I
Of
always
course.
give it a
Oops.
second listen. Like, I think that's the case. And I close the session and make sure that I come back to it at some point to sort of
Yeah.
confirm
Right.
that. But yeah, you'll always find something. And
Yeah.
unless you've got an unlimited time, unlimited budget, it's you gotta finish. And I think the point is that it's not anything that's going to ruin anybody's day. Like,
Right.
yes, you could
Right.
keep working on it, but it's not going to, I mean, the Steve Albini thing is like, oh, that's going to sell a lot more records. Like, you can do it and maybe
Hmm.
you'll like it better, but it's not going to change whether people are going to like it or not. So,
Hmm.
but then again, I was listening to, because I'm weird, in the gym this morning, I was listening to Kate Bush Hound's Love. And that record is just fucking perfect, start to finish, everything about it. But, you know, she took as long as she wanted on every single record after the first one.
Mm. Yeah.
And she's better at making records than I am.
She's not bad. She's not bad.
Yeah.
It's
I think.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, nothing. I was just it's just wild how that song came back and did so well.
Oh,
After the
running up
Stranger
that
Things
hill.
thing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. It just
30
shows. I
years
mean, I
later.
think like people of our age get nostalgic about the music we grew up with and stuff, but
Hmm.
some of the, like, that record is truly timeless
Yeah.
and great. And I always
Yeah.
worry that, like, oh, I just remember it that way. And there's some records that I love from back then that I listen to now and not really. And also some things come and go. Like, I remember
Mm.
I loved My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, which is Brian Eno and David Byrne. Do I have that
Mm.
right? Yeah. And then Debbie and I listened to it in LA at some point. I don't remember. And we're like, nah, this isn't as good as I remember. And then we listened to it again a few years after that and like, oh no, this is better than we remember. So for a minute, it just didn't work for us for some
Right.
stupid reason. But
Right.
but yeah, there's some stuff from that era that will just always be great.
Hmm.
I mean, there's stuff from every era that's like that.
Yeah. Have you guys ever heard of that Elvis guy?
Nah, fuck that guy.
I always loved that "Time Out of Mind" Bob Dylan record that Daniel Lanois and Mark Howard did, and they put out
Yeah.
that new reissue this year where Michael Brower and Chris Shaw, the genius Chris Shaw, remixed it, but also had some outtakes. And it was interesting hearing the Daniel Lanois, like, H3000 on everything, and I say that with love. And then hearing Michael Brower, where it's like bringing that stuff down, and you hear Dylan more in the room and not so much swimmy. And I love both records, but it was cool kind of hearing it with, like you're saying, the of the time thing pulled down. Either way,
I
it's a great record.
That's funny. I had no idea that existed. I'm gonna have to check it out. So Chris and Michael just did different songs on it, or
Michael did the album remixed, and then Chris did the unreleased stuff, the stuff that never came out, or
oh,
some of it, and then I think some live stuff's on there too.
man, I definitely want to hear that because yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great record. I remember hearing about Daniel's thing was always about just building a vibe for the record, and
mhm.
from what I remember, he built that over a few days with Mark and got it all going. And when Bob showed up, it was like done. Like, show up, make a record.
Yeah,
So huge amount of setup and really, really meticulous. But for the artists, it's like, yeah, just going to walk in and make a record.
yeah. And then they moved, so I think he did that at Teatro, and then Dylan's
Yeah.
like, "No, I want to go to Criterium, and they went down there, and Dan was like, no, I had the sound. But yeah, it's fascinating. Michael and Chris did a wonderful job, and just loving that record forever. That's what I think is cool about today with some of these reissues is seeing the behind the scenes side of it. But it's the same performances, just with some of those effects back, and
Right.
it's cool.
I'm definitely going to check that out. I mean, some of the reissue things, even when they're not trying to do anything, kind of ruin stuff. But that sounds like it's awesome. I remember John Paterno was the one who actually played the stuff for me. There was some reissue of Who CDs, and they'd remix the songs, and they kind of sounded exactly the same, but they didn't. There was something like in the motor of it that was different, even though sonically you couldn't quite put your finger on why it wasn't working as well. But maybe that's the problem, is they were just trying to match stuff, and they should have just done whatever the hell they wanted to do.
Well, I on that Elvis stuff, I've remixed some of the original masters, and sometimes they want me to strip the overdubs out, so it's just the live band in the room, and that stuff's real fun. Sometimes I'm not really recreating the mix. Like, a lot of times in those mixes, the drums were panned one way, bass might be the other, or Elvis's vocals way down. So we definitely don't adhere to the original pan so much. And I put a slapback echo on some 70s Elvis, and I was mixing another project for Sony, and I called Norbert Putnam, who played bass on a lot of the Elvis stuff, and he's a wonderful producer engineer. He did Margaritaville and other things. And I called him because the layout on the track sheet didn't make sense. It was there was mults of the kick drum and the vocal. Like, they would put bass and acoustic on one channel, but then there'd be a vocal and a vocal mult. Just weird things. So I called Norbert, asked him about it. He gave me this great answer. And then he said, Matt, if if you mix this stuff, you might want to use a different name, because the last guy that used to mix stuff, he put echo on Elvis's voice like he's Sam Phillips. I was like, well, Norbert, that was probably me. I did that. But, to help in some ways, I wasn't trying to make it sound like Sun. I was just trying to, normally, I put a little tight echo when a vocal's going high and it needs some thickening up. Or, to me, it was to help out his voice, not necessarily trying to recreate something before or after. And it's just we do get particular sometimes with things that have already been out. Now, I do try to match the feeling of the original records, and all that stuff.
Well,
It depends on the producer and the project. But
let me ask you a question now, because everybody who wants slap on their vocal says, "Oh yeah, give me some of that Elvis slap."
yeah.
Like, so why weren't you supposed to put like the signature effect on him?
Well, I think that's a fan thing. He had it famously on the Sun recordings. RCA, when Sam sold Elvis to RCA could not figure out how Sam was doing that echo. This is back when only like Les Paul and Sam Phillips were really doing it. So the first RCA release was Heartbreak Hotel, which is a horrible sounding record. And they used the hallway. They put Elvis singing into a hallway and Mike the Under in the hallway, trying to get slap back with reverb as opposed to delay. They
Right.
didn't know tape delay it, and apparently they called Sam, and he was like, "I'm not telling you how to do
Yeah,
that.
thanks for the
You're
money and
crazy.
fuck you guys.
Yeah, you didn't pay for that." So after that, it wasn't really used as much. And later on some of the stuff I recorded, they printed the reverb to the voice, plate or chamber, whatever they were using. But yeah, you don't really see delay on a lot of that stuff after that, and I don't hear a lot of tape delay on some of those RCA recordings, like you would think. They pretty much stayed to the room and reverb, a lot of reverb. But you know, I think I didn't have it at like rockabilly levels. At least I didn't think I did. But it's funny how certain fans, like there's a Steve Hoffman. It's a Steve Hoffman, those forums. I don't dare go on there because I saw like 2 comments about echoes or whatever. I was like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
But
Don't ever go read about yourself. It
no,
never goes
not
well.
good. But I did put some on there just because I feel like it needed, especially the live performances. It helped, just gives it, some energy on stuff. And I feel like with Elvis, you almost kind of hear it even when you don't hear it. You think you hear it because it's so attached to him early
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, well, bands need to get a new reference when they want slap. I mean, I'd go with, some of the John Lennon solo stuff. Like that's
Yeah,
slap.
yeah, absolutely. And that Beach Boys stuff, when you hear like they go on the talk back and it starts oscillating because they've got so many
Yeah.
loops or feedback loops going on each other. I always like when people say they want to sound like the war on drugs. For a while there, that was the big reference. People would send you, "Hey, I want you to produce this. I really want a war on drugs thing." And you get the you get the band comes in, and it's like mandolin, acoustic, and banjo, and you're like, "Oh, and you want to sound like the war on drugs?"
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's like, rock bands want to sound like 99 Problems. Like
Yep,
it's nope.
ain't going to happen. Is there one? Is there a mix of yours, Andrew, that you uh, you always of yours that you always love that you can go back and listen to and not wince or hear things different, or you feel like it kind of goes past what we were talking about earlier about transcending like trends or time?
Well, I gotta say, all the low roar stuff, there isn't a single thing on any of the low roar records that bothers me because we spend so much time getting them how we want them, and then it turns out like, yeah, we actually got them how we wanted it. I think, some of the stuff on Stadium Arcadium, I think feels good, but again, we spent a huge amount of time on those mixes.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I think those. I mean, I'm sure there's some others, but me and my self-loathing. So it's
yeah, you got to stop that.
yeah,
The
but the low
that low
roar stuff,
roar stuff,
absolutely.
that is you've done a good mix when it's like whenever I get on someone else's speakers or big speakers and they're like, "Oh, we've got some good low end and blah blah blah." I'm like, "Well, let's see." And I'll put on Phantoms and I'll put on some of the other low roar stuff and hear the imaging and stuff. But you definitely have, to me, one of those records that it's like, this is one of my staples to go hear someone's new highfalutin speaker system that's supposed to be
Yes, the
this
low
wet.
end on Phantoms is like I don't even know how that. I mean, it was in the track already. I mean, I'm not going to take
Yeah,
credit for it, but usually I destroy stuff like that. And yeah, the
yeah,
low end on that is just amazing. It always feels like you found the resonant frequency of the system in the room.
yeah.
Like,
And then
yeah.
it's not. Is it FAMS? The drawing a blank with the S1. We use the imager, and it feels like it's going. Uh, there's there's one thing you got in one of those songs. Like I'm trying to feel like it's
Oh yeah,
Phantoms,
yeah. And
but
I think that's a
it
different song.
wraps
It might
around.
be the same song. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
remember now, but yeah.
but just amazing, amazing. Well,
Awesome.
damn. I feel like Mark's going number 2 or something, and he's left me in charge.
I'm done now. We're good. Actually, before you
You
go,
look a little
Matt,
red. You look a little. You look a little red. Like we caught you.
you
You
might have.
rushed back. You ran back to the mic.
I did. I had to. It's fine. I'm actually in the bathroom right now.
Yeah,
That's a great, great sound for a bathroom, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Sitting on the throne.
Yeah. Before you head out, Matt, we have one other person joining, and it might be fun to have both of you guys on. So,
Oh shit.
who could it be? Andrew, any guesses?
behind.
Well, I mean, it might be someone with the last name Powell.
I think it's Vance Powell. That's my guess.
All right, let's find out. Here we
Apparently
go.
it's not Vance Powell.
Sorry.
Hello, Chris Shaw.
Oh,
Sorry,
Motherfucker. See, I talked to Chris, and all he said was, "Oh, yeah, I'm doing some
not that
Dylan
cool.
stuff." You didn't tell me you were doing stuff on that record.
No, I saw two favorite people on Puremix. I figured I had to go hassle you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, Chris, thanks for coming. This is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, for as long as I can be here.
Yeah. Anytime. This is a total free flowing show here. So
Yep.
I've left off on a Chili Peppers thing, and we're gonna pick it up in a little bit here. But I'm gonna step off and let you guys go at it for a second.
The last time I was pulled into a webinar with Andrew, I got suckered into being a sampler user. So, my camera doesn't look too good, does it? Oh well. Yeah.
It looks like we have 3 generations of iMac cameras here. Andrew's got the new one, and me and Chris have one from 12 years ago.
I'm rocking an iMac from 1992 here with the first gen camera. Yeah, it's so weird. It looks so bad.
Well, see, that's what made me run out and buy a webcam.
I did buy a webcam, and actually, on my previous screen, it looks great. But for some reason, coming back, it looks awful.
Wow, maybe it's your slow internet, which you don't have. You have fast internet.
I can't see Chris having slow internet.
The internet's been acting weird a lot.
Yeah,
so, Matt, what have you been up to, man?
I've been up to testing some software you're working on. That's badass. Exactly. This is what I've been doing.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Oh no, I was wondering what Matt was up to.
Oh, fuck that guy. Oh, he can hear us.
Nothing as cool as you guys. Damn. I called Chris to ask him a bunch of time out of mind questions, and he said that you guys were working on something, and I immediately got so jealous. I was like, I want to be on a monthly Zoom call with you two. Damn.
No, man, Matt, Andrew and I are always just shooting holes in each other's applications. That's all we're doing,
Yeah, But I want to hear some time out of mind stuff. Let's hear some of that.
I don't have any time out of mind. So, I mean, I remixed, a bunch of stuff for that last box set that came out, but it's just, it's just the usual, Lanoisisms, just like tons of like murky guitar that you can't figure out how you got the sound on, and the in-between chatter, which I really can't discuss too much about, but it's pretty funny, like, there's like some arguments going on, in between people. I'll just leave it at that,
Right.
But, and just the amazing usual Dylan, like how the song starts and then where it winds up, by the time they finish recording it like 25 times and the waiting arrangement changes. But I've told that story thousands of times before. So, I just wanted to stop in and say hi to y'all because it's nice to see two of my friends in the same room together.
Well, let me ask you a question here. Because nobody's listening to this. So how pissed are you that Michael did the record and you didn't? I mean, you were angry, right?
That Michael got to mix the whole record again instead of me?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
I'm joking because
I know that. Well, I've known Michael for years. Like he actually was really helpful very, very early on in my career about making business decisions and stuff like that. So I have nothing but profound respect for Michael. And actually, it was a phone call I got from Michael once, very early on in my career, where I realized, like, I actually might be pretty good at what I do. So like I was working on this Booker T and the MGs record, and the record was already done, but they want to record 2 more songs. It was all instrumentals. And so Michael had already started working at Quad Studios in New York. And then I was working with Booker and the band at what we call a Power Station. And we finished the first song, and I, sent the tape, across town, via messenger from Michael to start mixing it. And then on the next day, the phone rang in the control room. It's like, hey, I got Michael Brower on the phone for Chris Shaw. And I was like, okay, great. And I pick up the phone. Hey, Michael, how's it going? And he goes, I got to talk to you about these drum sounds, Chris. I'm like, oh, fuck. What's going on? Back then, Mike was the big, drum sample trigger guy with the 4-at, which, cost thousands and thousands of dollars, and I was like, oh, shit, like, what did I do? How did I fuck it up? I was like, oh, okay, like, what's wrong, Michael? He goes, oh, nothing. They sound great. I actually put them in the collection. And so, like,
I sampled your drums.
Apparently he wound up sampling everything off of it and used it on mixes after that. And after that, I was like, okay, I guess I'm a pretty good tracking engineer. And that was like one of the few times where I wasn't filled with like crushing self-doubt.
Nice.
That's awesome.
But
while you guys are both here, I need help locking my tape machine with the link. So can we just do some tech talk real quick? You said no one's watching, so I'm just gonna.
Yeah, man.
You haven't
make
fixed that
yet? This time as best I can.
Are you serious? Because
Yes, but we don't have to do it right now. I think I need a links timeline too. My links timeline 1's dropping out a lot, but
yeah,
I'm the only person in 2023 that's trying to buy a links timeline 2. Please write Mark at Puremix if you find one.
Mark's gone.
I'm
full
taking
screen.
over. I'm taking over. Guys in the chat room, if anybody has one, there you go. Now's
Well,
your time.
Matt, you might be better off with a microlinks, actually.
I agree, but I would have to redo the. This is. I was joking, so we don't need to take up too much time with this. But I would have to redo the connector I made because the
No, you wouldn't.
microlinks.
No,
It's different.
you can get a little adapter to put on the end.
Oh, good to
Yeah,
know.
that's what I did. I bought like used links cables, and then you just pop an adapter on, and it goes into the ribbon cable.
Oh, good.
Because when you need more than 3 machines, they're really good and easier to set up. And yeah. I mean, a links one should work, but anyway.
I'll get a microlinks. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Nice.
Are you working with external video sync, or are you trying to do it with WordCloud?
I'm trying to just do SMPTE and lock my 1200 to Pro Tools so I could dump stuff there and back.
Yeah, you need some other clock. It's not really going to work with just SMPTE because that'll have to slew the sample rate all over the place. You can do it if you have anyway. We should talk.
Yeah. We talk.
Yeah.
This is the reason I have a career, is that I was
We're losing.
I was just going to say, actually, no, everybody's getting to see Andrew in his element for what we've been talking about for the last 2 parts about how he was starting out, going in to solve these problems. So this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
They don't want to know. They don't want to know about this. This is different.
Yeah.
This is different. They don't want to know about this.
I will definitely help you out. We'll do a little Zoom.
Ooh.
I was definitely a links to expert back in the day. It's been ages.
I called
at least 20 years.
Chris about it. I was like, my first 2 thoughts were Chris, Andrew, and Trina Shoemaker. Between one of these folks, we can get this thing locked.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was literally the turning point for Trina.
Yeah. That's why I love that story with her about getting it locked for Daniel and Mark.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Chris is doing Atmos now, right?
In limited fashion, yes, I am. And we'll just leave it at that.
Train.
Nice. Uh-oh.
Well,
It looks like we have another guest coming in.
This is like Brady Bunch.
It is. It's going to get real Brady Bunch here in a minute. Okay. Joining us all the way from somewhere is the one and only Jean-Marie Horvat.
Holy shit. Jean-Marie.
Hey!
Dude, your microphone sounds like my mixes.
It's because you EQ'd me, baby. It's that Scheps inline plug-in thing, man.
It's the hard clipping. That's what it is.
Dude, I was watching you last week, and I didn't know half the shit that you did and what you accomplished through Synclavier and the years that we've known each other in passing. I'm more impressed with one thing, that I have somebody that knows my pain of being a Mets fan. That is the most impressive shit I've ever heard. I said, there is a God that knows my pain. How you doing, bud?
I'm good. Do you remember, this is how sad we were. Do you remember when it was like a breaking news crawl across the screen when they traded Tom Seaver?
Yes. That shows our age.
Yeah.
Dude, it was probably the lowest point in Mets history. And this year, did you hear about Pete Alonso that they're trying to trade him?
See, I'm not following it anymore. When I got out of the country, I had to make myself not follow sports anymore because I was not sleeping.
Bro, I understand. Trust me. Now, my kid's a baseball player. He's playing for New Mexico State right now. And I have to go through. Oh, yeah, dude. He's a big baseball guy. Thank God he's not in the music industry. That's all I got to say. That's all I got to say. Because I mean, honestly, bro, because, we got a place in Croatia because, I'm Croatian. So I'm going to be stopping in England just to mess with you and just to fuck with you a little bit.
Anytime. Come on over.
Yeah, I heard Carmen's now in Budapest now, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he keeps coming to the UK and not visiting me, which is why he's on the shit list.
He's threatening you. One day he's going to be knocking on that window.
Yeah, I'm not going to let him in. Like, you know.
Yeah, it's that Paul McCartney song. Somebody's knocking on the door.
Yeah, it'll be Carmen.
Dude, one thing that the contribution that you've given to our community, our music communities, I have to really stress this amongst your fans, your listeners. That program, the Batch Doohickey, the Scheps Doohickey thing, bless your heart. When the hell do you have time for this? I'm trying to figure out. It's like you're doing this, you're doing that, dude.
COVID, man. Seriously.
You're still doing it, though.
2 years. Well, yeah, but now, you know, it's support and it's like in smaller chunks. But yeah, the bulk of that thing was just COVID.
Oh, my God. You had a lot of time on your hands. That's what you're basically saying to me.
Yeah, I did. I did.
This might be an Andrew Scheps hologram program right now. Can we have Debbie run her hand to make sure this is...
Yeah. That's how I programmed this chat months ago.
It's all AI. It's all AI.
Dude, there's going to be an Andrew Scheps AI embedded embedded in Pro Tools. There's going to be a face like this. Your mix sounds like shit. Put this on there.
No,
remember the old.
I'll do the SSL version. That sounded great, Jean-Marie.
Remember the paperclip in Microsoft Word?
Yeah.
I gotta interject on this. So I had a funny thing over the weekend. I was like scrolling through Instagram as you do, and I come across a Puremix ad for the video that we released on Friday. And all of a sudden, I hear my voice doing a voiceover that I never recorded. I was like, they AI'd me.
Dude,
wow.
Dude, Skynet, dude. Skynet, you know, there it is.
Yeah, it was insane. I was like, that's me. I definitely didn't record that, did I? It was insane.
Wow, did you ask them about it?
Yeah. They sent me the tool they used and everything. Here, I'll tell everybody what it is because it was kind of cool.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was like, this is amazing. Wow. Yeah. And then Guillaume was gaslighting me, and he was like, dude, you recorded that. It's like, when? The video just came out. It was 11labs.io. There you go.
You know what you do to get Guillaume back? You publish his Between Two Shores. That's what
exactly. Yeah. Or we just play it right now.
Yeah.
If he's watching, that'd be awesome. Yeah. I also like having my job, so you know.
Well, that's true. That's
nice.
Good.
I'm getting off screen again.
Wow.
Crazy. Have you guys all worked together on stuff in the past? Like, have these all been intertwining? Matt, Jean, so. Chris, do you guys all know each other?
I used to see Jean-Marie at Record Plant all the time and was just in awe. Absolute awe.
Please. Come on, man. You're too kind.
Chris, I don't think we've worked on anything together other than software.
Yep, exactly.
And Matt and I haven't worked on enough stuff together, but we hang out.
Andrew did an amazing mix for me on a track by St. Paul and the Broken Bones called The Last Dance. And he did just an amazing mix on that. And I've never gotten to meet John, so it's nice to meet you, sir. And then Chris Shaw has made, like Andrew, tons of my favorite albums. And I got to hang out with Chris. We went to Motown together, so we've been in the trenches. But Chris is like definitely someone I always have on my radar too, like Andrew. Like, when can I get them something I've worked on to mix or do, because I love what they do, and to be involved in them would be amazing. So
yeah,
anytime, man.
Yeah.
I've got pictures of them in my bedroom, but we're not there. So I can't.
Oh
yeah, but you AI'd me onto like the Farrah Fawcett poster, didn't you?
I do send Andrew some creepy videos when I'm using his plug. I do like slow-mo zoom ins on his face while something romantic plays.
You're laughing because you still have that poster up, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh shit! Oh dude! The king of the one-liners. We could talk about all the plug-in shit he's done engineering, but the zingers that you don't get. Oh my god, dude, you're killing me right now.
And you know what the scary part was? Is I couldn't remember Farrah Fawcett's name until like one syllable before it had to come out.
Oh shit. Oh, I tell you one thing though. The impressiveness that I love about Andrew is, if you heard the Rival Sun record that he did, was the spectrum that he had on the mix. I am still listening to and find. I don't know how the hell you did that, but it was. I'm pissed that you didn't do the new album.
Well, I did half of it.
The new album.
Yeah, I did half. Yeah, they're putting out like 2 smaller records. Yeah, and I did half of each one. Mark Rankin did half, and I did half.
Bro, I just love what you did with that old boy's voice. Oh my god, it's like the voice of God. It's like you locked in. I was like, oh, this is the epitome of a great rock record and a great rock mix. It's like everything, the functionality, everything. Dude, fucking incredible.
You know what it's like though when you get the tracks and it's there. And actually, that record is one where, like, I use it as like a learning tool for do not solo all the tracks, do not high pass every track. The low end on most of that record is the bass bleed into the room mics. That's like it's why it's got so much space on it.
It has that 70s feel, dude. It's like, but you captured it, because a lot of these young guys would say, oh, I don't like that, let's just sample that. I don't think the way I heard it, I heard the sound, the kick drum microphone, you heard the circle of the kick, you heard the punch, but that guitar tone, just the excess of that sound. But you didn't use a lot of reverb either. I mean, it was a natural tail, bro.
They printed a lot of stuff. I mean, they tracked most of that record live.
Dude.
Yeah, I mean, it was bringing up the tracks on all their stuff is always just a joy, you know. They're so good. And I really think the new records, instead of it being more like, I think they write in the studio a lot on the previous record. And this stuff, the songs are, they obviously spent a long time crafting on this record. They're really, really good on these records, I guess, whatever the new 2.
The thing that you just said is so pertinent in our line of work. If you got good shit, and good shit's going to come out. Not even the Holy Lord above can fix a bad recording. We try.
Well, can fix a bad song. I think, you know, like we can make stuff work, but when it's a good song, it almost doesn't matter how good or bad the recording is. It's going to work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
I'd say that bad recordings now are kind of badass. I'm working on a garage rock band I love. They bought literally a shed from Home Depot and they put it in their backyard. And they recorded half of it to a 388 and half to an Atari MX 5050. So it's like when he goes to the floor tom, it goes like a double ox on it or something. And it sounds awesome. I was like, if they had cut this in a studio with like hi-fi sounding drums, I'd be bored to tears. But it sounds amazing. And I, they told me like, oh, it's 8 tracks. We did to a 388. It's in a shed. We got 5 songs. I'm like, oh, we'll do that in a day. We're mixing this thing like it's Rumors. I spent 9 hours on one song because we were getting so in there on some stuff. And I had a blast the whole time. And that sound, bad recorded sound, the bleed's terrible. But it right where you put the vocal mic, it makes the drums sit in a certain spot. Like it's, I'm really enjoying it more than if it had been like, 8 mics on each drum and sunset sound. I'd be struggling more trying to give it a sound than what this one's doing now,
Well, I remember Dave Schiffman was tracking a record at Sound City A, which is, that's possibly the best rock drum room ever in the history of ever. And what's that?
So I can make arguments against that, but go ahead. I'll give you that.
Well, definitely one of.
Yes, it's up there. Yeah, just
Cello / Ocean Way / East West Studio 2. Definitely on that list.
Marysville Studio A.
Yeah. Okay. All right. It's one of. But anyways,
okay. Yeah,
let me tell that fucking story, man.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
It's not even that great a story. But anyway, so he set up in the room, you know, and Dave is an amazing tracking engineer for rock drums. Just ridiculous. And he got an amazing sound, and the band comes in. He may have been done it with the drum tech or whatever, but he starts working on that, and they're like, nah, that's not what we want at all. And they ended up with the drums in one of the side booths, which were all shag carpet and weird sounding. They're fine for an amp. Mm-hmm. And that's what they wanted, and that's what they got, and it worked out great. So, you know, that can absolutely drive the record. And you're talking about pushing the vocal up and it changes the drum sound. I mean, that's exactly what you've said to me about every recording you ever did at Sun. You get your drum sound in the back of the vocal mic.
Yeah. You don't get to pick it, really. It's how it comes, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know, like Chad's favorite drum room is the booth at Sunset Sound Factory, right? Something like that. That little small.
Yeah, that little tiny booth.
Yeah.
He'd get some of the biggest drum sounds you ever heard. Take the front head off the kick, and it would have twice as much low end as anything you've ever done.
Exactly.
Yeah. The Neumann head. And like the drummer would always have to squeeze past the kit, and so you couldn't really see what was going on. And they'd sit down and the Neumann head was staring at them over the toms. And it would freak them out the first time they sat down.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Andrew showed me that Latin Playboys record, and that's what kind of turned my head too on, you know, all that cassette recording. But it's such a sound that you never hear, and all the tops rolled off. It's like everything we would never do or think to do, but it's just incredible.
Yeah. And Chad won't take credit for that because it was Louis recorded a lot of it in his kitchen on a 4-track cassette. And so, like Chad said, to make the record work, he was adding noise because the noise couldn't come and go. So that's part of how it worked, was the noise became the glue. So he could actually mix with just noise as an overdub almost.
I got introduced to that record working at Kingsway, speaking, you know, and Trina was my assistant there, and it was the first time I met Trina, and it was the first time I had heard that record. She said, "You gotta check this out," and I took it upstairs into my apartment, and I was like, "Fuck!"
Yeah, like, it just makes you completely rethink everything you're trying to do. You know,
I know. And just makes you feel that big because they're doing that much with, you know, an 8-track cassette deck, and here I am with, you know, 24 tracks and everything.
And apparently the cassette deck was kind of broken too. Like the head, the azimuth was all over the place, and so they brought it in to do the transfers, and then it broke.
And then I'm sure the noise reduction wasn't calibrated properly, you know. And
no, not at all. And it's one of the coolest records ever.
Yeah,
bastard. Hate that guy.
I hate that guy too.
All right. Speaking of coolest records ever, how's that transition?
Nice.
Yeah, nice. I have an idea. If you guys are good on time, this is all like super free flowing. So if you have to go because you're in the middle of it or whatever, you guys just speak up and let us know. I wanted to see if you guys want to ask Andrew about Audioslave. So we were at the Chili Peppers. We were around like 2002 in your career. And this would have been around the time of the first Audioslave record.
Which I believe was before, by the way.
Okay.
Because it took forever for that record to come out. Because it was 2 different management companies, 2 different labels. Chris sang the record 3 times. Like, yeah. So I'm pretty sure that was tracked beforehand. So before you guys ask questions, I got to say, Dave Schiffman did all the basic tracking on that record. And it was in Cello East West Ocean Way, Studio 2. And yeah, that record just sounded absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Definitely.
Yeah. How are you brought into that one?
Well, I was brought in because they were tracking to tape. And I may get this number wrong, but I think by the end, they'd used 247 reels of 2-inch. Because they just were rolling tape constantly. Like it filled the tape locker. And it was all BASF. And this was when every reel of BASF 2-inch tape had a little coupon inside the box for a free recordable CD. And so we just took a picture in the tape library and said, we'd like some CDs, please. And they just sent like a crate of them, which is pretty awesome. So anyway, so I got called in on that record because they were tracking for a really long time, obviously, to have that much tape get used. And then they realized that they were almost done tracking and they were going to want to start overdubs right away. But it's all analog tape. And they had, I mean, probably at least 30 takes of most of the songs because the arrangements were evolving and only the last 2 takes would be the exact arrangement that they wanted, or it would turn out like, nah, the verse was better earlier, but we think we have it. And none of it was put together. So there were pads full of notes from the tracking that Dave was taking, and he'd write down what Rick said and things like that. And they just needed someone to go through the tapes and like figure out what was going to happen with them. So I set up in Studio 3 and just started transferring tapes based on the notes. Like any take that had a star next to it, I'd transfer in. And then I just started comping. Like I kept waiting for people to come in and like listen with me, and because I hadn't worked for Rick a whole lot, but you know, Rick likes when people get stuff done, and if they do it well, then he doesn't have to do it. Like it's done and they can move on. So I just started comping, and the idea was that I would map out comps, and then they would cut the 2-inch, and then we'd make new tapes, do rough mixes to a second tape, and then could start the overdubs. And by the time I got done, the edits were so complex, like there was no way in hell we were going to cut tape. So then we did rough mixes from Pro Tools back onto the second tape. And then we made new multi-tracks. And actually, I brought some stuff. You guys are going to get to ask me about it soon. But I found it's one of the very few things I've ever kept for a session. So this is, this was a really simple one, actually. So this is the comp sheet for a song on the record that was called Mindfuck at the time.
Well, I'm going to put you full screen, Andrew. 1 second.
Title. Am I holding it up high enough?
I got Matt full screen. Hold on a second.
You got Matt full screen.
There we go. All right.
All right. So
a little
that's
higher.
That's the comp sheet.
Wow.
So basically, you can see down here are the take numbers. And then I just mapped the whole song, and I would listen through to the whole take and like, oh, that verse feels great. Oh, that feels amazing. And so I've got the, like, it's riff, pre-verse, verse 1, chorus, pre-verse 2, verse 2, chorus 2, solo, blah, blah, blah. So the whole thing. And I'd listen to everything, and I put check marks for the stuff that was good. Then I would listen to every single riff section. And I just started putting it together. And then I put the notes of what to change on the back. So this one didn't really have anything, not much to change, like get rid of the chorus drum accents. Like there were a couple different parts. And sometimes I would have absolutely no idea what the final arrangement was supposed to be. So I'd base it on the later takes. And I just put the stuff together. And I think there was one song, Gasoline, was the one that we kind of had to go back on. Because if you hear the record, the tempo is really, really steady. And when you hear them play it live, the ends of the Gasoline kind of chorus phrases slow down like crazy. And I think this was a real thing between the band and Rick. Rick wanted the tempo to keep going from what I remember, and the band wanted to slow it down. And so that comp ended up taking a long time because there's a lot of stuff about kick pattern. But the rest of them, and there are a ton of songs. And I love the names. I mean, there's one called One Riff Wonder. There's one called Shifty's Revenge, because that was Dave Schiffman's nickname at the time. I Hate My Head. The Ooh song. Mindfuck. There's Shifty's Revenge. The ones that are the actual ones, that's boring. There's one called Freebird. And that comp, that comp's kind of fucked up. Like some of the sections, you'll see I had to break it down into boxes because I was going like 2 bars at a time or 4 bars at a time, something like that. So this is one of the crazier comps. And some of the takes are incomplete or like ignore some of it. And so that was really fun. I got to say, that was awesome to sort of be there. And I think for a long time, the band had no idea that I was even doing it. Like I'd just sort of see them in the hallway. And they'd be like, hey, hi. Like, I'm just here working on your record.
Wow.
So anyway.
Yeah.
And then Chris was going to start vocals, and they were still working on guitar overdubs. So Dave was going to finish the guitars with Tom. and I was going to start doing vocals with Chris. So we set up in Studio 7, that little corner room, the same one that Wendy Page record went to, and just C12, 1073, 1176, straight into Pro Tools. Use the output 1176 as your fader. And it was C12 number 3, because that was the magic one. Same one used on all the Johnny Cash records. And so Chris came in and he sang a day, and I think it was like on a Friday. Go home for the weekend, and I got a call from Lindsay, who was Rick's, like she just did everything, basically. And she called me Monday morning before I left for the studio and said, "Can you travel?" Like, well, I know how, but like, what are we talking about? And she said, "Oh, Chris went home over the weekend. He wants to sing up in Seattle." Like, okay, because it's all on tape. Like, can't just go with a hard drive. So I got on a plane with 2 reels of 2-inch tape wrapped in aluminum foil, and the C12 in a case that I had to put under my seat, but it didn't fit. So I had my feet up on it, and I think they had the pre and a compressor up there, and we went and set up at it was like Pearl Jam studio. I can't remember the name of it right now. Floyd Reitzma was the engineer at the studio. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was something about the 1073 that was a little weird from Ocean Way, and we weren't getting the same color. So then we ran through an LA-2A as well, and all of a sudden, like, there was enough distortion so it sounded the same. And we set up, and the rest of the tapes were being FedExed up. And I was there for about 3 weeks doing vocals with Chris and Floyd, and then I had to split, and then Floyd took over Chris sang the record 3 times, but that was the first time through, and it was kind of amazing because he would be out in the live room and he sang it sitting in a chair. He did not stand up, and he's quiet too. Like most rock vocals, you'd be recording with the Neve on the lowest setting on the mic pre with the C12. We were up 15 dB from that, which is crazy. We were at 3 clicks up from there. And when he was really going for it, he'd just lean forward a little bit. And always full takes. And we get to the end of a take, and it would just be silent. And I'd kind of rewind and switch him over to another track. And every once in a while, we'd chat about something like whatever. But most of the time, he'd just sort of sit, and he's kind of replaying the take he just did in his head. And he'd go, "All right." And you'd hit record and do another one. And that was it for 3 weeks, just working through the record. It was insane. Absolutely insane.
Wow.
Did you do any comping?
I did once the stuff came back down. Yeah, I put together like the first set of lead vocals. But like I say, he re-sang the whole record. I think he was pretty raspy at that point because he sang along with every single take of every song. And on some of them, he's also playing guitar. Like there's a lot going on. And he's in the booth that was in Studio 2 that was not that well soundproofed. So he's trying to sing over the band a little bit. So his voice was a little bit rough, and then he re-sang it again. And then because it took like 2 years for the thing to actually come out, I think he got bored and sang it a third time. So yeah, there's some of those vocals that made the record because, if you don't beat them, you keep them. But I think probably 80 or 90% of the vocals aren't from that first pass.
I was just wondering.
And some of the comps he did with Floyd up there because he was really specific about some of them.
The thing I was trying to get at was like, when you were comping, it was basically like, okay, we'll take like those 2 lines from that take, and that that whole verse from that take, and then that section from that, rather than sitting there and slicing and dicing.
Oh no, and it was less than that. I mean, you would basically pick a take and then listen all the way through and say, okay, these 4 lines I got to go find somewhere.
Right.
There was no point in listening to every take and deciding which was the best line. Because also, I mean, his phrasing would change a little bit. And to try and put that together would have been a waste because he's so fucking good. You could have used any take.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's, when you're working with a great singer where you're not thinking about like comping words. You're thinking about shit. There's too much here. Like what how do I judge which is.
Yeah, and I didn't even want to. And sometimes he would say after a take, like, okay, that's the one, but we'll do one more. And then you knew like that was the take you'd start with, and you'd only comp in stuff that. And by the end of that record, and then for everything he did after that, as far as I know, he recorded his own vocals. He'd go in the control room, and when it was on tape, he just like mult me into all the tracks, and then he would do it. And then once he was on Pro Tools, he'd just do it to playlists.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't think I was the last person to record vocals with him in the room, but I mean, that's the way his workflow got to, because he just, like, the whole sitting between takes and trying not to, I mean, I think that's what he wanted to do, but then you start feeling guilty, like you're not talking to people or whatever, and I think it was just easier to be the only person in the room.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, Andrew, I got a question. So obviously, Audioslave, you've done several projects for Rick at this point. So when you're just jumping in and comping the band,
that was pretty early on, actually, and I was terrified about it. Yeah.
So did you, to me, that's a pretty bold, not a bold, but like a big step. Like, I guess I'll just go ahead and start making comp decisions and doing things and.
Well, it's what the gig was, but yeah, I was really terrified. Like, I could just make the comp sheets, but then there's nothing to listen to, and I'd have to play them every take. And I thought, well, there's no way to do what I'm doing and be even slightly productive unless I put the shit together. And if they hate it, then we'll go through and listen to all the takes. But they were just like, yeah, great, I'm going to go play bass on that. I mean, Timmy actually, at one point, he just, again, it took so long for the thing to come out that at one point Timmy replayed the bass on the whole record because he could, and it took like 2 days. Played the whole thing, and okay. And then we got Lenny Castro to come in and do percussion, and he did the whole record in a day. I can't remember if I've talked about that before. That was insane. So we would start. He just had his table like out in the live room with all of his stuff, and I just hit record. Everything was just a 67, except the congas had 414s on them. But I don't think he played congas at all on that record. And I just hit record, and about 8 bars in, he would have decided what he was going to do and just pick up whatever, and like the beer can shakers or whatever it was, and he'd start playing, and it was all perfect. And somehow he intuited like where the stops were going to be, like everything perfect right to the end of the song. I'd go back to get the first 8 bars, and then we were done and moving on to the next thing. And his groove was like he was sitting on Brad's lap. Like, it was incredible. And you'd listen and be like, well, he's not really doing that much, and then take the stuff out. And it was like when you'd switch back to a rough mix sort of thing. It was like, I mean, obviously Brad's an amazing drummer, but Lenny's percussion on that record is just genius. It's always just in support of everything. But yeah, his groove, it was Brad's groove, but with Lenny inside of it. Yeah, amazing.
Percussionists are the unsung heroes of a lot of records. Yeah.
Yeah, really, it's funny because Lenny did the exact same thing on the first Mars Volta record. He did it, I think he may have done it on By the Way. And then on Stadium Arcadium, that's when the Chili Peppers said, you know what, we don't want like structural percussion. We want percussion. And that's when Mauro Rifosco came in, and he played live with the band all the way through. Amazing percussionist, but doing a really different job. I mean, and obviously Lenny can do that too. But yeah, his stuff on those records, it's just the glue. The rhythmic glue is insane.
Awesome.
Andrew, last question for this. Sorry, Mark.
No, go for it.
Was there any thought, you guys were doing tape, bounces and then to Pro Tools and back to tape. And obviously it's taking a long time and a lot of redos. Is there any thought to like, the tape's going to get a little bit noisier the more we run this, and that length of time making that record, were you guys ever worried about some of the tape at some points with overdubs or like?
No, I mean the original multi-tracks that we made that we were going to cut, the tracking tape, but it was one generation down, and we listened to every mic pre at that point. Plus, it was the ATR 102s, the Ampex machines, which are by far the best sounding tape machines ever. Shitty to try and punch on. They're gigantic. The fan in the bottom is insane, but an amazing sounding machine. Like with Studers, any Studer, you push the level and it just stops getting louder. Like it limits like crazy. And the ATRs had about 3 or 4 dB more headroom for transients than any other tape machine I've ever worked on. Like insane. But anyway, so we were using early benchmark converters, and so we'd set it up so the transfers would be good. So it was 1 generation in, 1 generation out to tape for the multi-track edits I'd done. And those tapes didn't get played until it was time to mix.
Oh, okay.
Because we did roughs onto overdub tapes, and you notice I'm avoiding the terms that most people use for those, but I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. So yeah, those tapes did not get played. So the multi-track tapes that I made had been played probably twice when Rich Costi started mixing.
Awesome. That's cool.
Wow.
That's great.
Very cool. Yeah.
And did he mix that in Studio 5 or 4? What was that? Is that
the mix room at the back? Yeah, the one that had been what's his name? It had been the Clubhouse before.
Yeah.
Who was in there? Great producer. Did all the early Liz Phair stuff.
Brad. Was it Brad Wood? No.
No. You know, the other guy. The guy whose name is painted on the side of, it's painted on, actually, he's who I got my first Neve from. Bought it through Ocean Way, but he was selling it, and the first 8068 and the BCM 10. And I'm not remembering his name, which is insane.
Now, that I have to bring up, man.
Yeah.
How much did you pick that puppy up? Because you actually put a lot of work in that. A lot of people did not know how much work you actually put in that console. You picked it up, and then you did all these extra crazy stuff. And me and Tony Maserati were talking about that. So he goes, the dude is the jack of all trades. You know, it's like he does everything.
To be fair, Mike Wamskamp.
To be fair,
he was the tech at Ocean Way and Record One, and amazing tech. And he helped me out on a lot of stuff. Mike spent a lot of time at my house. But I basically spent all the stuff that I did was to put it back. It was a Mark II, which is really flexible. The Mark I's, there's functionality that kind of sucked and wasn't there. But the Mark II's, I just wanted it to run exactly the way it was supposed to run. So I recapped and I put new relays in on that board. And then I put flying faders on it. And then when I bought the expander, which was from Ocean Way, they had a 72-channel desk that you could rent. And I rented that to mix Stadium Arcadium. And then I bought the expander bit and tied it on to the other 8068. And that was a journey, getting those mix buses tied together and figuring out how to do it without going through amplifiers and stuff. Getting the grounding on that was insane. And it had all these replacement knobs on it. Like the ones at the Scheps reissues, which is a different Scheps than me. Nothing to do. You know, the silver concentric with the black knob on top. And I don't like those. It's just, they're shitty, and they would strip out, and then you couldn't get the filters to work anymore. And there was a guy, again, another name I'm not going to remember, really, really nice guy who had an amazing microphone collection. He would rent his mics out. But he actually manufactured Neve knobs. And so there was one day where, like, man, I've got to do it. And I bought 32 channels worth of Neve knobs. And it was the pan, the quad pan, and every knob on the EQ. So 5 concentric knobs per channel on a 32-channel board. And just replaced every single one of them. And then I dipped the console, which was insane. Take the whole thing apart. I had a little jewelry cleaner thing. I could get 5 Neves, and like you'd take the sides off, and then you'd stick pieces of wood through them so they'd be at the right depth. And then I'm hosing them off in the driveway, and I had to dry for 48 hours, and then you got to oil every single pot and switch in there. Like, it took me forever, but it was amazing. I mean, you know, you have to take care of these things.
Yeah, and it's like an it's like an old Chevelle. It's like an old Chevelle. It's like it's a muscle car.
And by the time I was done, I had a 64 input Neve, and I had the flying faders on the BCM 10 as well. So you could pop those in, extra card. But, you know, studios were going under at that point. So that was the old Motown studio in LA, which was then called Signet, and they were doing a bunch of post stuff in there. But that's where I got the flying fader system, because they'd ripped it out of theirs. And I got half the flying fader system from there. And then I bought another one from somewhere else. And, you know, all that shit was just sort of floating around at that point because nobody wanted it.
I had the pleasure to go to Andrew's house in Van Nuys, where the ladder stuff that he did, which sounds incredible. And I walked into your room and I said, how the hell did he do this? It was perfect. It didn't look like any. I walked in there and said, this is a friggin' engineer's wet dream. And you got, because, you know, we're married. We're all married. The wife ain't messing with you because it doesn't take the aesthetics to the house. It was the most amazing experience that I said, Andrew, he's a bad motherfucker, man. It's like, this is incredible. So I showed the wife. She said, don't even think about it. So I said, so I'm like, but this is a bad motherfucker who did this shit. She goes, don't even think about it. I said, well, I'm going to bring Andrew to the house. How about that? But she won. So that's Andrew's now in England. But the what people need to know who you are as an inventor, as an influencer, as not just a guy that makes plugins, that makes life easy for a lot of people. It's like there's a journey that no one really knows about except for the people who are in the know. And they need to know how you're more than just what's said on the label. They need to know who the hell you are. And that's why I'm here to support you, my friend. I love you dearly. And, you know, even though we don't work as much, or we didn't work like that, your work speaks for itself. And it's absolutely phenomenal. And people really need to know the ends, because there's a method to your craziness on that friggin' channel strip that no one knows about. And I hope to God they put 2 and 2 together by you rebuilding that Neve, man. Because you look at your Scheps plugin, it's basically you. It's like, holy shit, it's his modified 8068. It's what it is. It's that amazing.
Plus half the gear that was in that ridiculously large rack that was behind me. It's just all the bits that I wanted together.
Yes. And that I'm sorry, I left that one out too. It's like besides having a good front end, and it's like he's like the perfect blonde. Big old bitties, big old ass. Because if you look in the back, there's more ass back there you can shake a stick at. I mean, between all the pull techs. Did you have a Lang in there? Because I know I was enamored about you having a Lang.
I had
Langs are so oh Jesus!
I had a pair of Langs on the mix bus forever. And that's one of the reasons I decided to stop mixing, was because the Langs are amazing. I actually like them better than Pultex. It's the almost identical type of EQ circuit, but it's solid state makeup instead of tube makeup.
Right.
So they don't ring. They don't do all the kind of weird stuff that Pultex do, but they don't have a huge amount of headroom. And I actually sent my third one out because there was a guy who modded them and put 2520s, the API amp, in them instead.
Yeah.
Fucking terrible. I mean, not terrible. It was great. Really? The headroom was amazing, but like it was the folding up that was the thing. You know.
So I guess the headroom was the gimme, was the trick.
And that's when I realized like I can't fight this anymore. Like if I hate the side effects, it's like we were talking about before with the auto-tune artifacts. Like once you start hearing that stuff and it's bugging you, there's no way to get away from it with analog gear. I just would have had a different problem. And that's part of why I was ready to go in the box. Like, I want to have control over when things are fucked up instead of things just fucking up for me. You know?
Oh, yeah, you're not a control freak. I love it. There's a double entendre there, Mark. You got control and then frequency. Oh, yeah, there we
go. Yeah, nice.
But listen, Andrew, the boss showed up, and I promised her I was going to take her out. But
take her out,
please.
She knows you're talking to Andrew. That's what it is.
You know, because she knows I want that studio. Exactly, I want to build a studio in the backyard. She won't let me do it. The one thing is listen. I'm going to go to Croatia next year. Mark knows about Croatia because he didn't know. It's like so. My parents are from Zadar. Please invite if you're inviting me to your home, please come to my home. It's gonna be large. It's sexy when you're mixing on the Adriatic coast, bro. You know what I'm saying?
It's sexier if you're on the Adriatic coast and you're not mixing.
Yes.
Well, you can pretend that you're mixing.
That's what I did.
Yeah, you're absolutely. A little bit of hey, Mark, a little bit of Slivelica. A little bit of Slivelica.
Yep.
Malo rakia. Malo rakia. Yeah. All got it. Guys, awesome. It's a pleasure.
So
meeting
good
everybody.
To see you, man. Lots of love.
Brother. Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, Jean-Marie. Awesome.
I think the name you were looking for before was Scott Litt.
That's it, Scott Litt.
That's the engineer that you're looking for?
Yeah.
Okay.
As a producer whose room then Rich Costi, they put an SSL 9K. One of the early ones.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was a 6,000 or 4, whatever. There was one of those series SSLs, and then they put in a J. Yeah, it would have been a J in that same room.
The chat room's asking if Jean-Marie has a side hustle as a comedian. Because it would work.
Always.
Yeah.
And that dude, I mean, in the 90s, that dude was fucking ripped. Like, I don't know how he got his arms into sleeves. They were like tree trunks, man. That's what I realized. I was just a skinny, out of shape dude. And it took me another 20 years or 30 years to do anything about it. But yeah. Yeah, and such a great engineer. It's weird people don't talk about him that much. You know, he's so good.
He's so good.
They do talk about him, and he's done so many records, but he doesn't seem to have the public facing thing as much as he should.
Yeah, we just got a video of him on Puremix. Yeah, and I remember actually when I met you around the Pensado thing, they did something in Los Angeles, like right before that award thing, and Jean-Marie, it was in this movie theater, and he mixes on Oratones. And he just had the Oratones on a desk in this giant movie theater, and it blew the room up. It was like, how are you doing this? Like, what is going on here? It didn't make any sense at all, but it sounded so good just through the Oratones. And I was in like the back of the theater. It was crazy.
That's nuts.
Really cool. He's great. Okay. Let's go on here. So we are without a doubt doing a part 3. Before this, I was like, I'm pretty sure we'll do a part 3.
We've only gone backwards in time, haven't we?
We have, yeah. Absolutely, we have. Okay, the next thing I have is super interesting. And I like thinking of the timeline of music in this, I'm like tying it to my memory of Woodstock 99, which was like a kind of like a pinnacle event around like this, like the, turning into 2000. And you were involved with Alanis Morissette and Limp Bizkit around this time, which were like, there was a hilarious thing that happened at Woodstock where they put Alanis right before Limp Bizkit. So all the Limp Bizkit fans were at the front of the stage for Alanis, and you could kind of imagine how that felt when you were in there.
Yeah.
So it was pretty crazy. But all of that to say, I want to hear about your work on Results May Vary, which was around 2003. Release.
Yeah, I mean, again, that was slightly short-lived, but it was amazing. So it was a Rick thing, but sometimes he's like, hands-on producing the record, and sometimes it's a bit more of an executive production thing. And so it was more of that, sort of overseeing stuff. And Nick Raskulenix was cutting the band, and so they were basically done with all the basic tracks, and then Nick had to split, and so I got called to go and work, and it was just me and Fred for a while doing guitar overdubs. And at Conway, is it Studio C is the one at the top of the thing? Anyway, whatever. Mm-hmm. Which is the same studio I did the Saul Williams Amethyst Rockstar, which was the very first thing I ever did for Rick. Anyway.
Cool.
So we're doing guitars, and I had done a record in there with Dave Schiffman engineering, and then I was doing Pro Tools, and then I was tracking vocals, and that's the one that the DeLeo brothers were producing, which we talked about last time.
Yep.
And so, and it wasn't that long before that. So I was like getting all these little tiny amps. We were just renting stuff, and Fred was kind of into it, and we're just doing guitars on things. And then he said, well, I think we're going to get Head in to do some stuff from Head from Korn. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, so Head shows up, and the nicest guy in the world, just such a cool guy. And so we start doing guitar overdubs on the Limp Bizkit record. And Fred was around a little bit, but it was more like he just wanted to hear stuff when it was done. And so we just did whatever the fuck we wanted. And it turned into this thing of, because I hadn't been there from the top of the session, I didn't really know like what the vibe was, where it was going or whatever. So we just did whatever we felt like. And we did a bunch of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And then I'd comp it all up and, you know, do a rough mix, and Fred would, you know, like some stuff, not like some stuff or whatever. But it was going really well. But then Korn were going on tour. And so we booked studios in a few different cities for their day off. And I just flew out with a drive. And I think I had the backups on my iPod. Like, that's how small these sessions were, with just rough mixes or something like that. And we went to Miami, we went to Atlanta, we went to somewhere, maybe Richmond, and then somewhere in the Carolinas. And just on their days off, we'd just go into studios I'd never been at before. We went to Criteria after it had been taken over by, you know,
Hit Factory?
the family that owned, what's that?
Hit Factory.
Yeah, exactly. So I hadn't been there since all like the marble went in and it got rebuilt. When I was there, it was when I was in college, and it was just wood and mold, and you know, it was great, but totally different studio. And then we would just work for a day and just go fucking nuts. And then I would go hang out at a Korn show, you know, and then we'd go on to the next city. But when I got back, Fred had wanted to work, and this other engineer was like in the chair, and I didn't have a gig anymore. I'm like, all right. So I went home. So, I mean, that was it. But yeah, that was really fun, actually. I had no idea what to expect, but working with Fred and with Head were both, it was awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. That's, yeah, very cool. Did you know a lot of their music before that?
Yeah. I mean, look, if you ever turned the radio on, you heard their music. And I thought, you know, what they were doing, there was so much hate going on, even especially probably more in the record business than anywhere else for some reason. But to me, I mean, look, I liked Rage Against the Machine better than Limp Bizkit, just personal taste. But they were sort of the other side of this, the integrating things into rock that were not supposed to be integrated into rock. And like, you could go back to the, you know, Walk This Way with Run DMC and you know, Steven Tyler singing, like, and I suppose that was sort of the genesis, but it really took until then for these bands to kind of really figure it out. And those dudes would make a crowd go nuts. Yeah. No matter where they played. Like, the grooves were great, and Fred had a reputation, you know, but while working on stuff like that, it was easy to get into it, to really get into it. Yeah.
I was at that Woodstock show. I was standing next to the front of house village. You know, they had like the whole scaffolding and everything, and there was the wood panels around it that were torn off in the middle of that show. And at one point, the crowd was so packed together and like jumping up and down so much that our arms were pinned against our bodies, and we were just floating up and down, like without our feet touching the ground. And we were like, nobody fall on the ground right now. It was like one of the scariest things, but also amazing that there was so much energy too.
I just watched the Netflix documentary on that. It was insane. Have you seen that? The documentary on Woodstock '99. It's out of fucking control. You know, they lay a lot of blame on Limp Bizkit, of course, but you know, like it's just like how unprepared they were for 250,000 people to be in that place with no running water and like no showers and you know, price gouging on food. Ugh, disgusting.
Yeah. I mean, that's not that far off from, was it Firefest, the dude that just sort of gave it up?
Yeah,
I mean, that's almost the same thing, except that they had a stage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I just saw a video of that guy's trying to do Firefest again. He just announced Firefest 2. It's like, who's going to sign the...
Wow.
Enron 2. Yeah, that's my company.
Right. Enron 2, yeah. It's crazy. Okay, so moving on from there, the next ones I have up for you are I have Cash Unearthed and Alien Ant Farm. True Ant is the record.
Well, the Alien Ant Farm is the record that the DeLeos produced.
Okay, right. All right.
And that was super fun. I mean, they're a great band. It's just, there's nothing that will kill a band's career more than your first hit being a cover.
Right.
And they had that cover of Smooth Criminal. That was awesome.
Yeah.
It was awesome. But how do you follow that up? It's a song that everybody knows and everybody loves, and it doesn't matter what songs you write. You're not writing Smooth Criminal. But they were really, really good. Great musicians. And the DeLeos, I mean, that's just like going to school, watching them produce a record.
So cool. All right. So
do you think if you were born at the right time that you would think that that was the original? Like if a kid grew up in just the right circumstances.
Here's a good one. Here's a good one. When I was in high school, so I graduated in 84, so probably like 82 or 83, I was listening to the radio, and there was some call-in question, and I don't remember what the deal was, but they were talking about Paul McCartney. And the question was just, it's one of those things where it's like everybody knows the answer, but call in, and if you're caller number 1, then you win some shit. And so this woman called up, and the question was something like, what was the name of Paul McCartney's most famous band? And someone called up, and I can't remember what it was, because it's like she didn't know, and the DJ said the Beatles. And she's like, oh, was that his backup band before Wings? And this is mid-'80s. Like, it's not that long ago. So, yeah, you're always older than someone and younger than someone. You know, like there are a million Motown things that I didn't know had been recorded 20 years before. You know, and like War, What Is It Good For? I mean, I knew there was another version, but I didn't really know it. It's not like I thought the Frankie Goes to Hollywood was the original, but that's definitely the one that I knew, because you just don't come across everything. So, you know, I'm a dumbass just like everybody else.
Awesome. Okay, let's go to Unearthed from Johnny Cash.
Yeah. So again, I didn't do a huge amount on that. Fergie did that record. Jim Ferguson, amazing musician, a great engineer, really great engineer, and an amazing producer as well. And he'd done a lot of engineering with Johnny. And so he was engineering the record. But then, I mean, this is like how I got involved on the Mars Volta too. It's like the albums take longer than they're supposed to, and people got to go. So first, I came in on that record to I don't know why exactly, but Fergie was still there. But they were working at Rick's house. He had a studio at the house in Hollywood, and they were doing overdubs. And this one of the weeks was when Ben Montench came in and played all of his stuff. And I think that it may not have been the first thing, but it was the first thing that made me just lose my mind, was recording his piano overdub on Hurt. That's when I realized, like, holy fuck. Because I'd heard the earlier Johnny Cash stuff, and, you know, I think Rick's take on that was perfect. You know, he'd gotten to the point where the Nashville crowd thought he was a bit of a joke, and which was insane, you know, considering. And Rick just said, like, no, you're still incredible, and let's make some records and make lists of songs. And, you know, he had a really special relationship with him, where years after he died, Rick was still making lists of songs for him. You know, it was just like therapy. But that, like, you heard him, and you heard him be the voice of God, and the way he played guitar while he was singing was really special and all that. But Hurt, that was like, I don't know. You knew immediately how unbelievably crazily special that was. And then the only other, and then recorded, which song was it that Alice Cooper sang on?
I'll find it for you.
Yeah, I'm not going to remember right now. But I was there when we recorded all of Alice's vocals, and he'd just gotten back from a vacation in Hawaii with his son, and they would play 36 holes of golf before lunch. Like, that dude plays golf. That's his thing. He plays golf, and he showed up, was super, super cool. I think he played on the, was it a Depeche Mode song, or he sang on? Anyway, whatever. But again, that band was insane. You know, Smokey Hormel. Yeah, just a great, great band. So yeah, it was amazing. And then the point of bringing up that song is Fergie had to go back to Nashville, and he like put the faders up on the mix. And so, you know, that's his mix, but I finished it for him.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's awesome to be able to say you did that. But yeah, watching Benmont, sorry, what's that?
A Different Kind of Love is the name of the song. At least that's what the internet's saying.
No.
No. Let's see.
That was it.
You can't say enough good things about Benmont, man, because he's just the best.
Dude, he and Greg Lees, and there are lots of other people like this. He and Greg Lees are the guys who play all the notes that you forgot to put in your song.
Yeah.
It's like the way they support vocal melodies and bass lines under chord changes. It's insane. Their musicality is just absolutely crazy.
I got to record the two of them on an Aaron Neville record, and the other guitar player was this guy named Keith Richards. You know, so it was just like,
oh my god,
Benmont was like Keith, man, lay out.
Yeah, exactly. No, but Benmont gave me the best directions ever. Aaron was just doing a thing on a record on old 50s songs that he grew up on, so they were all covers. And we did a song, I can't remember which one it was, but after they did a run through and I recorded it, they came in and listened to the sounds, and Benmont was like, I don't want to tell you your job, but that piano sound is too good. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, it's just humor me and just put a 57 under the piano facing up anywhere on the bottom. And let's just try that for the next take. And of course I did that, pushed it up, and it sounded perfect. You know, it just narrowed it down, put it right where it was supposed to be, got out of everybody's way, but it was still Benmont, you know?
Yeah.
It's still the most amazing thing ever. But yeah, Jesus, that guy's great. I've worked with him quite a few times, and he's just the best.
Yeah, absolutely amazing.
Then you get him on. Yeah. Then you get him on Oregon, and then it's all bets are off. You know.
Yeah, and Rhodes and Will. It's like Jeff Babco is another one of those guys where every time they sit in an instrument, it's like, oh right, that's what that instrument is for.
Yeah, exactly.
Just insane.
That's crazy.
Are you not finding the?
I'm not. I'm scrolling through this thing.
All right, should I go get the CD and I can look at the track list?
That's what I'm looking at. But no, yeah, probably.
I'm sure you are. It doesn't matter anyway. Everyone needs to go buy the record. Like actually go buy it, and then you can see.
It's 5 volumes, 5 or 6 on here. Let's see.
There was
5.
one more after he died. Yeah, I think it's 6.
Wow. Yeah. So how long were you on that record?
Not that long. I mean, a few weeks, something like that.
But you were there on the tracking of Hurt.
Not on the basic tracks. No, the basic tracks were all done.
Yeah. It was overdub stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, that had to be exciting. That was such a.
And speaking of piano sounds, was it on that record? No, I think it was on the Mars Volta, which was in the same room. This is when I discovered my favorite way to mic a grand piano.
I was just going to bring it up because it was kind of similar to Chris's. Yeah.
Yep.
So we were doing low piano reinforcement in the chorus, just low octaves, which is just a great thing. to do because it works so well, and it's awesome getting that woody sound underneath the bass and stuff. I'm pretty sure it was on Mars Volta, but the grand piano was upstairs in Rick's house. It was like in the living room, and the studio was down in the basement. So you just ran cables up the stairs, and then I had a 414. Was it a 414? No, it was the tube C12A. So it's the C12 that's inside of the 414 thing, and it was a Philips one. Like, it wasn't an AKG, whatever. It was kind of weird. And so I just had it on a stand like this, over like inside the lid about halfway, to just point at the low strings. And I went downstairs and we did a take, and I was like, fuck, man, this sounds great. And I'm thinking, like, I'm a genius. That's perfect mic placement. And we get to the end of the take, and I think it was Omar playing it. And he's like, dude, the mic's moved a little bit. You should come up and have a look. And it had fallen all the way down until it was about half an inch above the cross in the ironwork, which is right over the low strings. It's like putting a full frequency contact mic on a grand piano. It's insane. The ironwork acts as a compressor. It's the most even piano sound I've ever gotten. The low end it's like that 57 underneath thing where everything is evened out and it's just perfect. And so that's been at one of the microphones on every piano recording I've ever done since. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, Chris is muted.
414, right on the harp, like right above.
Yeah, on the ironwork, right where it crosses, and just like completely flat, almost like using it as a PZM. I mean, obviously you don't have the surface area for that, but
I'm saying, but you're just pointing it. It's not touching it, right? It's just
no, it's just off the ironwork. Like, getting a stand there is a nightmare. So however close you can get it and dead flat. And that way it's not pointing at any strings. And if using that as a mono mic inside of any stereo mic technique, it's like a parallel compressor. It's just, it's awesome.
Because every time I have to do mic a piano, I sweat a little bit, because it's just like, oh man, every piano sounds different, and every piano's got a resonant spot that works and one that doesn't, and Dude, I always do mic on the bottom because I know I'm going to get at least a good mid range out of it.
Rudy Van Gelder hated recording pianos. If that dude can't just walk up and mic a piano, then nobody can.
Exactly.
So I think we're okay. We're all right.
Yeah. Amazing. Andrew has a whole video on Puremix of piano miking techniques. So go check that out, everybody.
And that's got to be one of them, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yep. That and the 57 in the hole. Love that one.
Yeah, which I don't really use that much, but yeah, that's another great, like 57 underneath, which I don't think I've tried it underneath. I'm going to have to do that now.
Andrew, my AirPod Pros died, so I'm on the Apple microphone, so I apologize. But it seems like a lot of these records with Rick at this time, you were not the initial tracking engineer, but you were kind of coming in and finishing a lot of the records. Was there a thought, was like Rick doing multiple records at the same time where you weren't available for tracking, or did he use different tracking people based on the artist preference? Or I was curious about that.
No, I mean, if you look at the tracking engineers he had, I mean, like Blood Sugar Sex Magic was Brendan O'Brien. Andy Wallace did the first Slayer record as an engineer for Rick. Like, the people who went through, and at that time, like Jim Scott was everything around the By the Way time. And then Dave Schiffman was definitely one of the guys starting, well, before Audio Slave, but, in that era. And then I became someone who tracked a lot of stuff later on. So it was just sort of as people move up. And, with the records you were going to work on with Rick, your name would get known and then you'd get other work. And so eventually people would move on. But, yeah, I mean, I worked on records with him, not full time or anything, but for probably like 12 years. And I think I tracked in the middle 4 and was mostly mixing in the last 4, something like that. I mean, I don't know how it actually works out, but I started off like Amethyst Rockstar and then tracking the stuff on that Wu-Tang Clan tribute thing. And then lots of editing and things of that nature, and then a lot of more engineering, overdubs and cleaning stuff up before the mix, and then tracking and then mixing, tracking and mixing, or just an evolution.
That's cool.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
I got to agree with you.
Yeah.
Can you open another one, Mark?
While you were on, it's pretty cool. Just keep doing that. So Mars Volta, 2003. Probably the record that you were tracking piano for that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
So incredible.
So again, Dave Schiffman tracked that. That was tracked at the Laurel Canyon house, the one that they did Blood Sugar Sex Magic at. And Dave did it, and Omar is one of those guys who has the entire, and Cedric as well, and the band's amazing, but Omar and Cedric have the finished product in their head before they even start. But at that point, Omar hadn't made a million records. And so Dave really helped him get it. And I think one of the conversations they had right at the beginning was that Omar really liked a lot of the Pink Floyd stuff, in terms of guitar sounds. And Dave said, man, that's all small amps. It's gigantic sounds, but it's small amps. And so Dave, I believe, really got him to sort of embrace that. And they tracked all that. And then they were at Rick's house, and I came in while Lenny Castro was doing the percussion, and then sort of took over for Dave because he'd had to go do something else. And so, in fact, it was probably the same low piano we were doing. We did the low piano reinforcement, but the chord changes were so fast, it sounded ridiculous. Like, what's great about that is when you hit it and then it dies out over the chord and then you hit it on the next one. And that's what really works. And it just gives this weight. And this was like someone playing stride piano under the track. So I'm like, well, how about this? Why don't you play every fourth chord, and then I will pitch shift it to the root of whatever chords happen in between. And we did it. And this is like, pitch shifting plugins were not great then. So it was whatever, I was probably the Pro Tools built-in pitch thing, or maybe the Waves one had come out at that point, the sound shifter. And so that was it. I was editing the piano to the drums to get the timing right, and then pitch shifting. So when you listen to it soloed, it was like these huge piano hits that decayed really naturally, but as if there was a whammy bar on the piano because it was flipping all over the place. And it was awesome. It's one of those things like, I think we can do this, and then it actually works.
Mm-hmm. You were pitch changing the sustains. You weren't pitch changing. You weren't like,
yeah. So there was one attack every four chords. Yeah. And then it would just move to follow the song.
Oh, that's cool.
And that was that single mic mono, low octave thing.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And we did a lot of background vocals, I seem to remember, or maybe that was done. I don't remember exactly, but it was another one of those where I was just in there for a few weeks finishing it up. And then again, Rich Costi was mixing a lot for Rick at that point, so Rich mixed that.
Yeah. Wow. Any crazy stories from that one? The chat's been very excited to talk more on Volta.
I know. I don't know that I've got a lot of really crazy stuff for that. The next record, though, just to skip ahead, I got a call from Omar, and he's like, "Hey, man, we want to come work with you at your studio." Like, okay, cool. And he's like, "Yeah, we just want to track bass." So he decided to just track bass at my studio, and that was it. He didn't want to do anything else. And then, so he did that, and it was awesome, and I think they recut some stuff later, whatever, but a lot of the bass was tracked at my place. And he said, look, what we're going to do, though, is Monday through Friday, we're going to do Mars Volta stuff. But then on the weekends, I got to score this film, like this experimental film. And I'm like, okay. And he said, yeah, and you're going to play trumpet on it. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I mean, I barely played, like every once in a while. I mean, I was playing more back then because I was playing trumpet on some of the Carmen stuff and making a fool of myself by pointing out that I'd played trumpet on something, And he's like, no, it's going to be great. And we're going to go through pedals because I had a little pickup on because I was so into Miles Davis. I was playing electric trumpet in high school. And So we did that on the weekends, and it was nuts. Like the music was crazy, and he's like, "Look, I just want you to play like whatever you want, but this one needs to be really fast and loud." Like, okay. And he'd be fucking with the pedals while I played, and then we'd do like 3 or 4 tracks of it, and you go, "Okay, cool," and then move on to the next one, and yeah, nuts.
Was that a manual dexterity?
That's not the name of the second
from
record,
well
oh yeah, the film.
for the
Yes.
film, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Which I
Nice.
don't think I've listened to since we finished it. I should probably have a listen.
Wow.
Because maybe my trumpet's on it. I think we mixed it as well, but I might be making that up.
Nice. Yeah. At your home studio?
Yeah. And I remember there was some bass stuff that was so fast that what did we do? I took the drums and I cut them up so we could slow down the track, but without pitch shifting it, because then it would have been all over the place. But like to keep the feel of it exactly the same, but at a slower tempo. Then we'd play the bass, and then I would manually edit on every single bass note and kind of accordion it back up to the right tempo, and then paste it back into the fast version. And it didn't sound like, you know, someone just playing it like Jocko, but it was pretty fucking cool, actually. It was a really weird way of working, but it's like, otherwise we're not going to get these parts. Like they were practically unplayable at the tempos that were going. I mean, you know, it was only a few spots and a few songs, but just, you know, making stuff up on the fly, because otherwise there's no bass for those 2 bars or whatever. So that was pretty weird. He remembers out loud.
Right. That's pretty amazing. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to come back to that at some point because I'm going to have more questions about that record, I think, but we'll save it. So at this point, we would have hit the Jay-Z 99 Problems mix, right?
Which we've already talked
somewhere
about.
In there, which we talked about last one. And then is this the point where you started to see that transition into mixing with Rick?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it was a little bit slow because Rich Costi was still mixing a lot for him. But then Rich moved to New York, and that kind of took him out of that, because that was still like you brought mixes over to Rick's house to listen to, and you listened with him, and you know, so you had to be in town.
Yeah.
And so I think that was part of the transition, definitely.
There was one of the interviews you talked about the drive up to Rick's house. You would pass other people coming back down that have been playing him stuff.
Or so, I would be working downstairs, and then like Jim Scott would show up to play him mixes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That had to be, I mean, what was that whole thing like? What do you have to add there? Like
well, it was amazing. I mean, you know, these guys were my heroes, and they're just showing up to play some mixes. And, you know, sometimes, especially with the imposter syndrome, like you never really get comfortable. You never feel like you deserve to be there. And having these dudes showing up and playing mixes that just sounded insanely good, definitely like, I'm just going to go downstairs and record an overdub, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's fine. Yeah. So how many people were, you know, kind of working with Rick at one time? I mean, how many records do you think were normally going on at once?
I don't know. It would depend. And like I said before, like his involvement on different records was different. Sometimes, you know, he was super hands-on. Sometimes he was just there to make sure stuff was cool. Sometimes it was somewhere in between. So sometimes sort of the production crew would be who the band set up, and he would be the one overseeing, and sometimes he would put people in. Yeah, it really depended. How many records were going on? I don't know. I mean, it would change, you know, like while he's doing something like the Chili Peppers, not much else would go on because that would be pretty consuming.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I remember you telling the story of driving up the hill or something. I'm like remembering it very poorly, but you were talking about how you drive up the hill and people would pass each other and be like, "How'd it go?" or whatever. There was some story like that from one of the interviews that stuck with me.
Wow, I must have made that up because I don't remember.
All right. Well, let's go to Little John and the East Side Boys, 2004. Coming out of Mars Volta.
There are a couple of hip hop records right around there where Rick just said, "Hey, go mix this Little John thing," and that was at Conway, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one track, like, and I knew nothing about it. I don't know how the track came to be, and I just sort of showed up and like, okay, I guess I'm gonna mix this, and I'd send Rick a mix, and that one, that had, it was on a VR, which was not a desk I used a lot, but you know, whatever, they were good.
Mm-hmm.
And I was mixing the song, and it was going really well, and Rick was liking stuff, but we were still overdubbing. It was almost like a 99 Problems thing, where like the song's not done, but I'm already mixing. And then there was one day where he's like, the low end's different. Really? And I'm listening in the control room, and I couldn't really hear it, but I'm like, okay, it maybe it's a little different. And I checked the recall over and over. And this was, you know, I'm printing a 1/2 inch, so it's not like you just put it up and flip the phase and say like, oh no, okay, there's the problem. And I could kind of hear it, but not really. And I could not figure out what it was. The recall was perfect. I mean, it's not like we'd ever torn the mix down.
Mm-hmm.
So double check everything. And he says, well, I'm going to send my car down, because he would listen in his car a lot. And so Dave, who worked for him as well as Lindsay, Dave brought the car down to Conway. And I got in the car and I listened to the old mix. I'm like, man, this is fucking awesome. And listened to the new mix, like, what the fuck happened to the low end? Like, it was so obvious in his car. And I went in and I hit the recall on the desk like 4 or 5 times in a row, because I was just pissed because I couldn't figure it out. And like the 4th time, boom, the low end's back. So something in the master section had just like not come back right. And then it did. And like, okay, nobody is going to touch this console. Nothing gets turned off. I don't even want you saving a recall until we print the mix, because like that's the only way this could have happened. And yeah, but other than that, yeah, just, you know, another one of these like 3 or 4 day mixes, because you're overdubbing and doing all kinds of stuff. But I don't think I dealt with anybody other than Rick. I mean, there were a couple of people came by, but you know, yeah.
Andrew, so you weren't picking the studio to mix at? Were they telling you where to mix just because that's where tracking had finished, or?
Yeah, yeah, and I think because also Conway was great for like people with posses. There was a lot of that going on at Conway at the time, and the control rooms were huge. Like, it worked out really well. And their hospitality was like Hit Factory or Record Plant hospitality. Like, they were on it. So I think that's why I mixed that one in that room. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to remember picking a studio, and I can't really think of a time. It's like, but that's why I built a room at home, and always had a room at home, because I needed to be able to do stuff, but I also never felt like I could spend other people's money to book a studio. So it was the combination of the two, to have a place I knew, but also because I just felt really bad spending people's money.
Yeah. Well, speaking of spending people's money, I'm going to go and get some Q&A questions from the chat. And while I do, you guys should tell Matt why that Stream Deck on his cart should be in use.
I mentioned to Mark Abrams, I was like, oh, well, I'm talking to you. I just got my 14th bill for Stream Deck that I have turned on twice so far and haven't given enough time to.
Oh, for SoundFlow, dude, just get Bounce Factory. And that way you won't sit there listening and hear a bunch of bullshit that you don't need to hear. It'll print in real time. It'll solo stuff up for you. You'll be all set.
I'm so scared. So scared of the. Oh, Chris, you're muted. You're muted, Chris.
Sorry, I was just making sure I wasn't the source of the echo that I was hearing before. Yeah, man, just get Bounce Factory. That's all, man. That's the only app you need, really.
When Andrew first told me about it, he had mixed that St. Paul track for me, and he texted me, and it was real late for Andrew being in England when he texted me like, hey, the mix recalls up in the instrumentals up in the Dropbox. And I was like, is this even you talking to me, or is this the Bounce Factory texting me?
Yeah, but see, while I was doing Bounce Factory, like for about 2 years, I was up until 2 a.m. coding every single day.
Yep. Yeah, I'd catch Andrew. I'd be sitting here, in Texas, and be like, "Andrew's still up," like, because I see him on Slack, and Slack, light would be on, and be like, "Oh, I guess he is,"
Super unhealthy. So unhealthy.
Are you guys working on a SoundFlow together?
Well, Chris, I'm just testing what Chris has done, and it's fucking great.
Yeah, it's he's testing what I'm doing and shooting holes in it, which is good, because he's found stuff that I totally did not think about. So it's good.
But it's really good. But we're not going to say what it is because
we can't.
We're not going to say what it is.
Yep, I'll tell you in private.
Yeah,
I'll submit for you.
Everyone, just mute your speakers for 5 seconds. Everyone, please.
Yeah, everybody, close your eyes.
It's a MIDI controlled coffee maker. All right, that's what it is. It's a MIDI controlled coffee maker.
Yeah.
The more you turn the dial, the stronger the coffee gets.
Yeah, and he didn't account for decaf or instant.
Exactly.
So that's what I'm working on with him.
And and the choices of dairy products. It's either skim or fat free or
Yeah, but again, he didn't have enough non-dairy choices.
Yeah, exactly.
Like some people like the oat milk.
And the thing is,
I'm not one of them, but
Andrew was so down on not having the powdered, creamer, option. So I had to get rid of that, even though it would make the app way more expensive, So
yeah.
Let me try this again.
What are you working on, Chris?
Thing here.
Yeah, what the hell are you doing, Mark?
Well, I'll show you. Here you go. Hold on, it's coming.
Not what I'm working on, unfortunately. So, yeah, there you go. But you were talking before about the bass leaking through the overheads being a huge part of the sound. This vintage act I'm working on right now is the same thing. It's just like, oh shit, if I filter out the bottom end on the overheads, the bass just totally loses its vibe,
Yeah, don't high pass, kids. Not until you need to.
Yeah. I used to never high pass, and then I did a record. That stupid? It's on a TV commercial. That band Len that sampled that song "If You Steal My Sunshine." It's been on a bunch of TV commercials or whatever. And I was mixing that band, and one of their other songs. When I was mixing it over at Brooklyn Studios, I think it was called in LA. And I was mixing this song, I'm cranking it up on the NS10, and the left woofer is just doing these mad excursions, but there's no bass going on. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Turns out the guy sampled the hi-hat off the record, and the hi-hat was right on a warp. So there was this huge DC voltage being passed through in the sample, and it was moving with the hi-hat. I'm soloing the hi-hat. I'm going, what the hell is going on? And then I just kicked in the low pass at the first notch and just disappeared. And I was like, okay, I'm high pass filtering everything now. But now you're telling me I can't.
Well, not on everything.
But
I just recorded a 1900s pipe organ at the Orpheum Theater. They spent like $60,000. They refurbished it, and my friend Tony Thomas says it's going to be a Christmas record. So I brought a little rig and set up, and I had him hit like a xylophone on one side, and one side is rhythm, one side is all the other stuff, and it goes down to like 10 hertz. I mean, it's got some bass on this thing, and so the bass line comes out one side, all the rhythm instruments come out one side. So I kind of time aligned the close mics to my stereo center picture kind of deal, and was messing with that a little bit. And I got the imaging where I really liked, where you could feel the room, but feel any mics I was using were together and not phasey. But because bass is on one side and they're not the same picture, left, right, in a room bouncing around, I just for fun looked down the oscilloscope, and I sent it over to Jeff Powell because he's going to later cut the vinyl and just make sure, he could do it, because the phase of it was insane, and it was always forever changing, depending on what tab he pushed and stuff. It was crazy.
Can I tell you a little pipe organ story from last week?
Please.
So I was up. AES had this immersive audio conference, a little 3-day conference, which was awesome. It was really good. I learned a ton, met a bunch of people, gave a keynote speech where I got like halfway through and they said, oh, by the way, you got 10 minutes left. Like, oh shit. So anyway, but on the Wednesday, there was an organ recital, and this was at University of Huddersfield. And their concert hall is an old church, and it's the original organ, and they've just put in like not stadium seating, but theater seating up the back. And so just classical organ recital. But Hyun-Kook Lee, who is just an absolute genius and has studied so much about immersive sound, but he spends a lot of time in recording and how you do it. And he's got this 7 mic array that he uses to record in a space to get no more than 7, because it's 714. Is that right? Or maybe he's recording 514. But anyway, so with 4 height mics, which are actually at the same height as the other ones, but the way they're pointed. So he recorded the whole thing. So I'm in the room listening to the organ recital. Then the next day, he's playing the recording back in this gigantic fucking room it's like 30.2 because it's set up for high order ambisonics playback, but he's just using the speakers for the Atmos recording. And it was better. It was better than hearing it in the hall. It was fucking insane. And these are all like Scheps small diaphragm microphones. And the low end was like crap your pants low end. Like exactly what you'd want to hear.
Oh, man.
Absolutely. And no subs, because, there's nothing to record. He's not doing, speaker management with the subs. Absolutely amazing. And completely phase coherent, because the array is maybe this big. Well, my hands are off the screen, but, like the square, I think he said was 1 meter or maybe 1.5 or something like that on a side. And that's it. Incredible. That's my pipe organ story.
There you go.
Wish I'd talked to you first. I did it all wrong now.
And you can remind me pipe organ when we talk about Weezer.
I'll make a note. All right. Pipe organ, Weezer.
Hey, both these boys worked on Weezer.
I know. I was just going to say, that's a lot of Weezer.
I didn't know you worked at Weezer, so there you go. It's news to me.
Yeah, bit after you.
Yeah, I kind of stopped listening to him after I worked at them. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. It's all downhill.
Yeah, just kidding.
Okay. It's one of those moments I'm like, don't say that. Don't say that. Like I'm thinking that to myself. All right. Okay. So here's a question from the chat room. Ask Andrew, what was one of the mixes that seemed to be the most transformative, meaning it sounded 180 degrees different when you were done with it? Do you have one that you're proud of? We'll say that you remember.
You mean it's really different from the source material?
I think so. Yeah.
Wow. I don't know. I mean, sometimes you put up a song and you're like, ooh, I'm going to distort the fuck out of the drums. And you do it and it works really well or something. Like sometimes you really hear something differently than the tracking. But most of the time, especially if they're working with a good engineer and a good producer, everything is built on everything else. So to really change it, I think the biggest thing was more. Did I tell the story about the film thing I was mixing at all? It was
with
like
Omar,
one song. No? Huh?
Not the one with Omar that we were just talking about.
No. And it wasn't Wendy and Lisa either. So there was one song for a film. And I have no idea why my name came up, but it was like, hey, let's get Andrew Scheps to mix this. Like, okay. So they send the tracks and I'm mixing it. And it just felt like it was missing something. Like there was no bass in the verses. And the choruses just felt a little like empty, like sort of see-through in a way that wasn't really good. And I'm like, well, they're probably going to hate it, but I'm going to play bass in the verses and I'm going to put B3 because I had an A100, which is this different chassis on a B3, in the choruses. And I'm not a good bass player or an organ player. So it took me forever to like work out the part and then immediately record it before I forget. And I'd play I mean, my timing's okay, and I'm somewhat musical, so I could get through it when I knew what I was going to play. And I recorded the stuff, and then I sent the mix, and, you know, with a note like, hey, you know, I hope you don't mind, but it just really felt like the song could use this stuff. But obviously, if I'm missing something, just let me know and we'll take it back out and, you know, I'll work on the mix some more. And the phone call was, yeah, we're going to have someone else mix this, but could you send the bass and the B3 tracks? Like, wow. All right.
All right.
Wow.
So that doesn't answer that question, but that's,
yeah.
Yeah. So I got to
Did you send
like a double scale session.
Yeah. Did you send the tracks?
Yeah, of course. But that was the thing. I said, well, you got to put it through the musicians union, you know.
Yeah.
Not that that ever helped, but yeah, I mean, I got paid to play bass and organ.
I noticed you have this weird organ credit in here.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I never even got a credit. I don't think it was a soundtrack album, and those are notorious for having movie credits on them.
Yeah. That wouldn't be that weird of a credit for you anyway, I don't think. All right. What's Andrew's view on studios in London compared to the States in this time and day?
It's really hard for me to answer that because I've made so many records in not studios. Renting houses, like the Weezer one we talk about it, that was recorded in some crazy places. So I don't know. It's weird though that they are different. They really are different. The same, I mean, in some of it points to the real difference, especially like in rock drum sounds between the UK and the US. Totally different. The amount of distortion, the way you get the sustain on the snare, like that stuff is completely different. You know, it's just style, but I think the studios sort of speak to it. But, you know, in either country, you run the complete gamut of studios. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that there's anything. I mean, what's weird is there are way more vintage Neves in the States than there are here. It's like when the VRs came out, they were easier to get in the UK. And the UK was like, well, fuck these old things. And most of them went over to the States. And so there are lots of APIs over here, but there are not a lot of old Neves. So there's stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah. Crazy. Okay. Another question asking, when is your next mixing video going to come out on Puremix? There's a start to finish
more
coming.
About that than me.
Yeah.
So
there's a start to finish.
Can we say anything or not?
Yeah, we can tell people that it's coming.
All right, it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. There you go. All right, next question. Now, Andrew has. We can talk about it. There's a start to finish series with Andrew at the Power Station in New York City,
Nice.
which is rad. And
it's the first time I'd worked there. I'd been there to visit people, but it's the first time I worked there. And it's with
Which
the
room
band.
did you work in?
The wood room, the
big one. Oh, yeah.
Huge room. Yeah.
Yeah, I've worked a million times. It's great. Yeah.
And I actually had the drums in a booth because we had so much other stuff to record. It didn't make sense to have them out in the room, and it was too live anyway. But with the door open. So in the booth with the door open, which worked really well. And it's with a band called Geese, who are fucking awesome. Yeah. So their first record, they tracked it, and they got in touch with Frank McDonough, my very longtime manager, about doing a couple of like test mixes. And I generally don't do that anymore, but man, they sent the roughs and like, I love this stuff. Absolutely love it. Like, yes, absolutely. Send me the files. I will do it. And I was in the middle of it. And they got in touch with Frank and said, oh, look, we're really, really sorry, but we've got someone to mix the record. And I'd spoken to them before I started. So I emailed the manager and I said, look, if anybody other than Dan Carey is going to mix this record, then you've got to give me a chance to do these mixes. And they said, no, it's Dan Carey. Like, okay, done, move on. But then when we were going to do the start to finish, I got in touch with them and we did a song, and it's awesome. And I'm actually going to see them play in Bristol next week on Thursday.
Pretty amazing. Yeah. Also, I should say it's now called Berkeley NYC. I called it Power Station, but it's not Berkeley NYC. And it's Room A, I think is the title. That's what somebody in the chat was telling me. Okay. That series is awesome, though. There's an electric cajon in it.
Yeah, which does not make cajon sounds most of the time. It's fucking crazy. We used a theremin. We kind of went nuts.
Yeah.
In a really weird way.
Yeah.
And it turned out great, I think. Yeah. It's one of the best drum sounds I've ever gotten because he barely played the cymbals, which gives you such latitude to move microphones out and do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really, really fun to watch how you were making the kit and all that. So that'll, be something to look forward to as you get to see Andrew in a tracking situation and producing and all of that, as well as mixing. From start to finish.
Like it says on the tin.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any validity in using a clean EQ, filtering, or minor subtractive only, such as like Pro Tools EQ3 or something clean, prior to hitting a channel strip for color or tone and shaping, like your plugin?
Yeah, absolutely. The very first idea for that plugin was I wanted 2 EQs, and I wanted a pre-dynamics EQ that would only cut, fully parametric and clean, and it didn't have boost. So filters and 3 or 4 bands of cut whatever the fuck you want, then all the dynamics, and then a super colorful boost only, no cuts. And they kind of rolled with it for a little bit, and they're like, man, we can't do that. That's too weird. People are going to want to boost before and cut after. And I said, well, okay, but if you combine them, then how could I have an EQ before and after the dynamics, which you got to be able to have? And so that made them do the reordering and the insert, which they thought was going to be easy. And then it took for fucking ever. Like there was so much under the hood that had to happen. But that's why the EQ ended up what it is and why you can reorder the modules and do an insert. And the insert was specifically so you could have a second EQ and put it pre or post. But yeah, that was the idea for that channel strip.
Very cool.
It doesn't have to be done that way. I mean, you can do it however you want, but yeah, I think, getting rid of the stuff that you do not want early rather than processing it is a great way to go. And then the color is just the fun. That's the tone and the making stuff work in a mix. Like, don't turn the whole thing up. Turn up the frequencies that are good.
Yeah. Chris or Matt, do you have anything else? I mean, I guess that's answered. But
not at the moment. Nope. I'm enjoying listening.
I can't beat that. I'm taking notes.
Right?
That's my theory.
All right. So can you please ask Andrew how to get the best separation of centered vocals from banging drums and a deep bass with airy instruments and lots of effects? How do you mix, Andrew?
That sounds like an AI question.
Well,
that was an AI question.
I think, though, but the sort of easy-ish answer to that is partly what I just said, which is only turn up the frequencies that are good, move shit out of the center. I mean, if the core of the question is how do you keep the vocal to where it can be heard? And then the other thing is what Matt was saying before, like about the Elvis vocals, where they turn into just 200 hertz, and to make them come out without having to crank them is some sort of parallel processing, because it'll smooth out the frequency, not frequency response, but like, I don't even know what the words are to describe it, but parallel compression. It just evens things out and makes stuff come and go less. So those are the things. And harmonic distortion. If you're having a hard time hearing something, it feels sort of see-through and like it's getting covered up. Use harmonic distortion. Now it has more information at the frequencies that matter, even if they're not there to EQ. So that's what I'd say about that.
And a little bit of creative ducking, sidechain compression here and there, that works too.
I'm so lazy. I really should do more of that, and I don't.
Again, it's usually the last ditch. It's usually like, you know, when I'm like, just like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm tired of like struggling with this. Let me just put all the music into a bus and then duck it with the vocal at a certain frequency and just be done with it, you know, just so it sticks out. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you can successfully describe the problem you're having and not just, I can't hear the vocal, but figure out why you can't hear the vocal, and then you've answered your own question about how to take care of it. It's like, well, the snare's messing with it. Well, duck the snare. Or look for an EQ point where you can differentiate them. But the problem is a lot of stuff sounds good in the same frequency range. So panning away or ducking is really the only way you can make the stuff coexist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just got to pick like what has to be dominating at that one point in time in the song, and then that's what you got to go with. Period. You know.
And the answer is always the vocal.
Always.
Awesome. All right. I actually don't have any more coming in from. There's requests for you to talk about certain records, but we're going to wait until they come, I believe, unless you would like them now.
You know, if there's...
well, a quick one was Black Sabbath 13 All in the Box.
No.
Cool.
That was quick. Yeah, that was towards the end of the mixing on the Neve and all the outboard gear, and yeah.
Do you ever use other DAWs to mix, like Logic or Ableton, or have you in the past? Or
twice. There was a set of pieces. So Shara Nova from My Brightest Diamond, who also was the singer on the Blue Hour classical record, which we have to talk about at some point. That's very recent, though. That was last year. She did all the music for an installation. So it's like on 4 screens and things like that. So it was going to be sort of mixed in quad live at the venue. There was no way I could finish the mixes, and they'd started it in Logic. So I did it all in Logic so that they could open up the Logic session and the guy could keep working, because he didn't use Pro Tools. So that was one thing. And there were, you know, a bunch of different pieces for that. And that was pretty amazing. Yeah. Harp and 2 voices, but there was a lot to do for some reason, like to make that feel as though you hadn't done anything. And then one song, Friends Make Garbage, but Good Friends Take It Out, which is fucking awesome song title from the first Low Roar record. That one, so that record, Ryan did it in GarageBand, which you could then open up in Logic. And so I would open up his GarageBand sessions in Logic and then bring it all into Pro Tools. And, you know, there was a real process to it. It wasn't simple, but that was the way I worked on that record. But this one song, he'd done all this crazy fucking automation on EQs and stuff. And I just thought, I'll never transfer this over. And what's the point? Because there were only, on some of the songs, I would do a lot of overdubs and a lot of moving around. And that song, it just was what it was. So I didn't need to do a lot. So I learned Logic enough to mix that song and then immediately forgot
it. Yeah. Matt or Chris, how about you guys?
I mixed a record all in the box once in Cubase, and I actually kind of enjoyed it, but it was a seriously underpowered system. So it was like, I get to the point where I start liking it, and then the computer would just like hit play. You had to wait like 30 seconds before you actually heard anything. But there are certain things about Cubase I really liked. I like the fact that in Cubase you can, when you're editing waveforms, you can like make a region or a clip, whatever, and then using the mouse you can drag the audio behind it without having to use nudge keys like you do in Pro Tools. And you can just, it was really great for lining up snare hits and vocal stuff like that. And so I've been bugging Avid about, you know, like, why can't we do this? You know, just like control, command, drag a waveform and just have the boundaries be the same, but just move the waveform behind it. You know? But if I have to do, most of the time, if I get sessions from other people from the DAWs, I usually just have them like, you know, export it out as WAV files and then print whatever effects they like. And then if it's in Logic, I have a really old copy of Logic that I can open up sessions in. So like Logic 10, I guess. And yeah, occasionally I'll have them send the Logic file over as well, just in case they forgot something or something didn't translate properly. But these days I just have them do it, export and give it to me because.
And I'll tell you one reason why neither of us want to spend any time in anything but Pro Tools is SoundFlow. We've got so much shit that is automated and fast and easy that is a total pain in the ass to do manually.
I had to do a session last week without SoundFlow. It killed me. It killed me. And I literally, like, session prep time went from being an hour to like 6 minutes, with SoundFlow scripts. I literally just select an artist, like, kick drum tracks, and go, oh yeah, those are kicks. I hold on Shift to hit a button on my Stream Deck, and it takes out their plugins, puts my plugins in, routes everything, and groups it, and then physically moves the track into my template. And that's all I do. Watch SoundFlow do all the work. It's great.
Yeah. I have to say too, the before Bounce Factory was out, Chris made a package called Track Data Utilities. That's like, that made SoundFlow and spending the money on a Stream Deck worth every penny. Just having that, just being able to like copy track data, paste the pieces that you want or whatever was just incredible. So yeah, you can't have SoundFlow and not have track data utilities. It's too good to miss awesome on that one. Yeah.
I think the other DAW that Matt uses is Tape.
Yep.
Yeah, what's that tape thing you're doing?
It costing me a lot of money right now is what it's doing. Eventually it sounds fun. I used a couple other DAWs. Once as an assistant, I started on Cakewalk Audio. We were a Windows based at the first studio I worked at, and it one day would not open for us, so we had to use Cool Edit Pro, and I had to learn how to multi-track in Cool Edit Pro with about 20 minutes before the band showed up. That was fun. But actually during COVID, I had a band, the leader of the band was stuck at home and bought a synthesizer and had a lot of fun writing stuff in GarageBand. And he had already built up, like these guys were saying, a lot of automation and effects, and didn't know how to bounce it out properly. And there was something about those effects, it's kind of like when someone sends you a track and deverbs on there and you go, well, I'll start to put this on there. And then you realize the deverb is why it sounds so good. Mm-hmm. And so I just said, let's mix this thing in GarageBand. So he airdropped me the files, and I would open up GarageBand and work off GarageBand, just because it was that sound that I would screw up if I put it in something else I had better tools in or whatever. So
Logic just opens them and they sound exactly the same.
Oh, I didn't know that, and I don't have Logic, so I've been screwed. I wouldn't know what to do anyway.
No, but what the hell? It's done, and it probably sounds great.
It was kind of fun to feel like a caveman again, with like not having shortcuts, not having a routine or knowing where to go to, just like
not having any habits.
Yeah, it was kind of fun starting over like that in a way.
Once,
never did it again, but once.
That's great. Okay, last question for today, and then we're going to be putting some stuff off to part 3. There's questions about when are you guys going to talk about Low Roar? Part 15 is the answer.
No, Low Roar is going to be a long, well, maybe it won't be a long conversation, but yeah, it should be a long conversation.
It should be.
So we'll talk about that all at once. I mean, that's the last 12 or 13 years. So there's a lot to cover, but yeah, there's a lot to say.
Yeah, maybe we'll segment that to its own thing or something. We'll talk. So last question for this, and I think that it'd be awesome to get everybody's take on it. In general, how are we supposed to do our mixes for crummy speakers? And that question evolved from how do we mix for AirPods from previously. But then he said, ask this one: how do we mix for crummy speakers? So.
You don't mix for crummy speakers. Your shit translates to everything. I mean, I think it's the answer. You don't mix for something that's bad. That's like when people said, oh yeah, I got to mix for MP3. And then MP3 encoders got better. And then what? So you've tailored your mix towards something that sucks. The only thing that you would ever have to mix for is vinyl. That's, Matt, you're talking about or one of you was saying about sending something. Yeah, to make sure that Jeff could cut it. I mean, So there are things that you physically cannot do on a physical format like vinyl, but the whole key is that it works everywhere. And I think that's one of the things that's sort of freaking people out with Atmos is Atmos has a real specification for EQ in your room and all this kind of thing. And we're just used to working on whatever the fuck we can get our hands on and making it sound good everywhere. And you'd always check, like, I mean, I would say that Oratones and NS10s sound like ass. But they're, well, NS10s not so much, but Oratones are a fantastic mixing tool. You stop focusing on how great the bottom of your kick drum is, and it's all about balance and all the rest of it. I mean, I think I said we were talking about 99 Problems. That mix started exploding out of the speakers, and I knew not to listen through big speakers anymore. And I did the entire last day or day and a half only listening through the little mono speaker on the ATR 102. The tape machine in the back, and it's got the one little speaker so that you can rock the tape and edit.
Right. Yep.
But that, and it sounded great, but it also meant you weren't going to fuck with it. Like, you're not going to make definitive mix moves while listening on that thing.
Yeah, I always like the speaker on the Studer, 820 2 tracks. Those always have a really good stuff on it. And I always like having a speaker. Like I think it was Rick Ocasek who taught me that trick. He would actually take a speaker and put it behind the console, like just pointing in a random direction. And like, what's that for? He goes, that's just like, listening from, to the next room over. You just have it back there. And if you can hear the vocal from beginning to end, you're good. That's all that matters.
Yeah. Yeah. It's balance and mid-range. Low end's cool. I love low end, but that doesn't make a mix unless you're Jimmy Douglas, in which case, fucking hell. I mean,
Jimmy's a master.
Yeah.
Funny enough, right over my speaker or my shoulder, is this old amp. Oh, I'm flipped. That's an old Ampex mono speaker like that Alan Lomax would travel with in a suitcase. And I had a client recently that wanted to check his mixes mono through just essentially a car speaker, and the Oratones. I didn't want to get an amp too. This has a built-in. Thank you, Mark. This has a built-in amplifier with it, so I could it was easier to grab this and turn on and listen. And it kind of reaffirmed for me, like, I've got bigs in here and I've got the Proax, but you listen mono and all of a sudden something will jump out to you right away. Like, we'll play the mix. I thought the mix was great. We listen back mono and go, oh, the voice needs to be just a hair brighter, or the bass is just needs to be a dB up or down or whatever. And whatever little dB or dB and a half moves we make on the mono speaker always translate back better on the nice speakers, right? And so it always reveals something good to me, that if you can make it sound a little bit better on the crummy speaker, it's going to sound usually better on the big speaker. And I think a lot about those wildflowers or rumors that, if I play them on my nice control room speakers, they're going to feel a little too bright to me, but they translate amazing on every other crummy speaker, And so I think it's good to reference the crummy speaker a lot, but you don't have to sweat it so much, but it'll tell you some things that usually will translate then back nice on the big speakers. So it's good to check out.
Can I just point out how fucking badass Matt Rossbang is? So we're talking about, use an Oratone or, some little Radio Shack thing, or like Chris Lord Algie's got his boombox. Matt's like, yeah, man, so I got this speaker that's just like Alan Lomax used to carry around in a suitcase. Like, what?
Actually,
they got away with that.
I didn't even know it existed.
Their tube, it's a concentric speaker. It's got 2 preamps, so it makes a great guitar amplifier. Works good in the chamber.
Motherfucker.
It's an amazing old speaker.
Where the fuck did you get that?
I had that one for a while. I grab them when I see them because there's a tape machine model that people rip out the preamp for now, but no one ever wants a speaker. But the speaker is amazing, and it's got like I said, built-in amplifier, everything.
I got to say that this is the thing about Matt is, absolutely, not only do you know everything about everything to do with all this stuff, but you manage to actually know the people. Like when you're saying, oh yeah, and I talked to the bass player who played on a bunch of the Elvis stuff. Like you hunt these people out and make sure that you talk to them, not like hear a story about them. And that is just, man, it's insane how many people you've talked to and about the stuff like back to the source. You're as much a historian as anybody I've ever met who's making records.
I'm talking to 3 sources right now. I'm talking to Andrew Scheps, Chris Shaw, Mark. Come on, you guys you're the bass players.
No, man. No, seriously,
awesome.
I just love what a student of the history you are. It's amazing.
It is incredible. Yeah. Also, you totally like ruined my thing, because I was going to be like, everybody's talking about oratones to go for a crappy speaker, but I've got a baritone. But then Matt did his thing, and it's all ruined now. So.
Yeah.
It was Behringer's thing.
They all work.
Yeah.
That's the alternate title of this this stream is Matt Ruins Everything.
I feel that way most of the time I'm working in this control room.
That'll be the intro video next week, is like Andrew talks to awesome people, get crossed out. It'll be awesome people talk to Andrew, then it'll be crossed out, and it'll have Matt Ruins Everything. That's great. Nice. All right. I think that's going to do it for us in part 2. We are absolutely going to be back for part 3, because we really haven't made any ground in your discography.
Well, we caught up, right?
We caught up. Yeah, we skipped over a lot in part 1 and jumped right to Jay-Z, 99 Problems, and we left out some really important stuff like Audio Slave. And yeah. Awesome. All right. Yeah.
So we got to schedule it. So are we going to pick a date right now on air and then stick to it? What are we doing?
I think we could do that if you want to.
Because I'm going to mix with the masters soon. So, I mean, I'd love to say we could do it from there, but I don't know if we could. I can ask though.
Yeah. When are you? Well, I don't know if you could say. So 18th or 25th. Pick a date. Or the 11th. I could also do.
Well, I'm back home on the 25th. But why don't we see if I can do it on the 18th? That's the last day. No, because I got to travel up to Paris. Yeah, my life sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it's fucking awesome. And the 11th is only the second day of the seminar, so it's a little early to try and do it. Yeah. So let's say the 25th. Let's try and do it on the 25th.
All right, guys. Awesome.
Andrew, can you do a friends and family mix with the masters, and then Shaw and I can come to France, and Mark, and we just...
Dude, how about we do it in England and you just come and visit?
Yeah.
That sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me. It's too bad you're not at Mono Valley. It's too bad you're not at Mono Valley anymore. I would love to see that place again.
But... Yeah.
Well, I mean, my gear was there. I just went when I was tracking. Yeah, let's just dispel that myth on air. I only worked there when I was producing, but my gear was there. It was like a partner, but I was working from home the whole time. But yeah, unfortunately, I mean, it's still around as an amazing place you can rent out, like as a holiday let. You can go stay there for a week because there are a bunch of bedrooms and stuff. And the studio itself is there, and you can do what they call a dry hire over here, and bring gear in, and you could book it out as a studio. But yeah, unfortunately, it's gone, and so is all my gear.
Funny enough, I was in Nashville at a Tex, and he's like, "Well, I just got a bunch of the shipment in to go through some stuff," and it was Andrew's. Because I saw a couple things, I was like, "Wait a minute, is that Andrew's? This piece?" And some of it's back in America now.
Man, I do miss it, I got to say, but it was absolutely the right decision at the right time. It would just be languishing in a storage facility,
Yeah.
And
awesome. You still got the beautiful modular right behind.
I got the modular. I still have the BCM 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, I got to bounce. I got to bounce. I'm saying I got to bounce because.
Okay.
You got to bounce a mix? Bounce Factory?
He's got to bounce Factory on a mix.
Yeah, awesome.
Chris, thank you for hopping in today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I hope I didn't shit in everybody's parade, but there you go.
Not at all. No, thank you for being here.
So good to have you, Chris.
All right, guys. I'll see you around.
See you later.
Hey, Chris.
I might need to say I didn't bring a charger. I'm at 3%, so I need to go too, fellas.
All right. We'll call it
all need
a
to go.
day. Yeah. Awesome. Now that we've all gone big head mode.
Thanks for letting me be Ed McMahon to your Johnny there, Andrew Scheps and Mark.
Thank you for being here, Matt.
Great.
It's awesome.
Thanks for hanging this whole time, man.
Oh, man. I was
not like Chris, who's a lightweight. He already bailed.
Just left early. Yeah. Awesome. Chat room, thank you so much for your questions. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be back for part 3. And yeah, we'll see you then. Very excited to get to some of these other records. We have a lot of ground to cover still, so we're going to have to find a way. So,
well, part 19.
Right. Yep. Awesome. All right.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody.
See you guys next time. Bye.